Hello guys, welcome to Phoenix What If. So in this video, we will see, what if Naruto awaken the power of the Holy Sword God and get married with Xenovia Quarta? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Cha, Pter 1. The Wandering Blade and the Blue-Haired Zealot. The fog that clung to the town of Brekalon was a physical entity, a smothering gray beast that devoured sound and leached the color from the world. It crept through the cobblestone alleys with silent, grasping tendrils, weaving between the stooped, half-timbered houses and caressing the cold, damp slate of their roofs. It was an ancient fog, one that smelled of wet earth, forgotten history, and the deep, chilling waters of the nearby fjord that snaked its way inland from the unforgiving northern sea. The air was so thick with it that the tolling of the Vespers bell from the town's monolithic stone church was not a clear, resonant peal, but a muffled, sorrowful thud, as if the sound itself were struggling to break free from the suffocating miasma. In this town where time seemed to have coagulated, a figure sat alone at a rough-hewn wooden table outside a dimly lit tavern, the Drowned Norseman. The establishment's sign, a crudely painted Viking with an ale horn, was barely visible through the swirling gray. The man was an anomaly, a splash of vibrant, living color in a monochrome world. His hair was the color of spun gold, a shade too bright for this perpetually overcast land, and his eyes, when they occasionally lifted to scan the oppressive gloom, were a startling, piercing blue, reminiscent of a summer sky he hadn't seen in years. He was broad-shouldered, with a lean, powerful build that spoke of a life of constant, rigorous motion. His face, etched with the faint lines of experience that belied his apparent youth, was handsome, but it was a hard, quiet kind of beauty, forged in crucibles of pain and loss. This was Naruto Uzumaki, a name he hadn't heard spoken aloud in what felt like a lifetime. He wore simple, practical clothes, dark, durable trousers, worn leather boots, and a gray, high-collared coat that seemed to absorb the surrounding mist. At his side, leaning against his chair, was a long, cloth-wrapped object. It was unassuming, looking like little more than a bundled walking stick or a mundane tool of some kind. Yet, the way he kept it close, the almost imperceptible way his senses were always aware of its presence, marked it as something more. It was an extension of him, as vital and as present as a limb. He lifted a ceramic mug to his lips, the steam from the hot, spiced cider mingling with the fog. The warmth was a welcome, if fleeting, sensation against the persistent chill that had seeped into his bones. He wasn't just passing through Brekalon, he was waiting. For 3 days, he had been a silent fixture at this tavern, observing the rhythms of the town. He watched the fishermen, their faces weathered and grim, haul their meager catches from the docks. He saw the stoic, black-clad women move like ghosts through the market, their voices low and hushed. He noted the way everyone, without exception, would cast a furtive, fearful glance towards the imposing silhouette of the church that dominated the town's skyline, its spire a jagged finger pointing at a perpetually hidden heaven. There was a sickness in this place, a palpable fear that went deeper than the fog and the cold. It was the reason he was here. His senses, honed over years of bloodshed and survival in a world far removed from this one, were a constant, humming network of information. He could feel the vibrations through the soles of his boots, the subtle shifts in air pressure that heralded movement, the very thrum of life and death around him. It was through this heightened awareness that he felt them long before he saw or heard them. A new vibration, sharp and discordant, cutting through the town's sluggish pulse. It was the rhythmic, purposeful tread of trained warriors, their discipline a stark contrast to the shuffling gait of the locals. He took another slow sip of his cider, his gaze seemingly fixed on the swirling patterns in the mist. His posture didn't change, his breathing remained even, but deep within him, a predatory stillness took hold. He had hoped for a quieter resolution, but hope had long been a luxury he couldn't afford. The figures emerged from the fog like wraiths given form. There were 2 of them. The first was a young woman, her movements precise and imbued with a dangerous grace. Her hair was a startling shade of cobalt blue, cut in an asymmetrical style that framed a face of sharp, aristocratic beauty. Her eyes, a deep violet, were cold and hard, filled with an unshakable, zealous fire. She was clad in a form-fitting, dark blue battle outfit that was both practical and subtly ornate. Bearing the insignia of the church. At her hip, a massive sword was sheathed, its hilt wrapped in white leather. The sheer size of the weapon suggested its wielder possessed prodigious, perhaps unnatural, strength. Her companion was a younger girl with light brown hair tied in twintails, her expression a mixture of nervousness and manufactured bravado. She, too, wore the uniform of the church and carried a sword, though it was of a more conventional size. She walked a half step behind the blue-haired woman, her eyes darting around as if expecting an ambush from every shadow. They stopped in the small square before the tavern, their presence a stark intrusion on the town's suffocating quiet. The blue-haired woman's gaze swept the area, dismissing the few cowering locals with a contemptuous glance before it landed, and locked, on Naruto. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of surprise crossing her features. He did not flinch, did not cower. He simply met her gaze with his own. His calm indifference a silent challenge. You, she stated, her voice clear and carrying an accent that marked her as Italian. It was not a question, but an accusation. You are not of this town. Your presence here is an anomaly. Naruto took a final, deliberate sip of his cider before placing the mug down on the table with a soft click. The world is a large place, he replied, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. A stark contrast to the boisterous shouts of his youth. His own speech was a mixture of accents, a linguistic chameleon shaped by years of wandering through countless lands. Many people are not of the places they find themselves in. The woman's hand rested on the hilt of her greatsword. I am Xenovia Quarta. My associate is Irina Shido. We are here on holy orders from the church. A sacred relic, a fragment of the holy sword Excalibur, has been stolen and tracked to this godforsaken town. We are here to retrieve it and to purge the heresy that festers in this place. Naruto leaned back in his chair, a single eyebrow arching in mild amusement. Heresy. All I see is fear. The people here are terrified. Not of a stolen relic, but of the thing that has taken up residence in your church. Xenovia's violet eyes sharpened with suspicion. You know of the presence in the church. Who are you? A stray magus. A mercenary hired by the thieves. I'm just a traveler, Naruto said. His voice even and devoid of any discernible emotion. One who dislikes seeing people live in terror. The fear of the common folk is of no consequence to our mission, Xenovia declared. Her tone ringing with the absolute conviction of a true believer. Their souls are weak, easily swayed by darkness. We are here to excise the cancer, not to soothe the patient. Now, tell me what you know, outsider. Your cooperation will be noted. Your hindrance will be met with swift and final judgment. The younger girl, Irina, puffed out her chest, trying to emulate her partner's intimidating presence. That's right. You're speaking to two of the church's finest exorcists. You should show some respect. Naruto's gaze shifted to Irina for a brief moment, and the sheer, unfiltered ht of his presence seemed to make her flinch. It wasn't menacing, not overtly, but it was ancient, powerful, and utterly unimpressed. He then looked back at Xenovia. The cancer you're looking for, he said, as a fallen angel. A mid-tier one, by the feel of it. It's been feeding on the faith and fear of the townsfolk for weeks, drawing them in with promises of salvation before consuming their life force. The local clergy are all dead or have become its puppets. The stolen relic you're hunting is likely in its possession. It's probably using the holy energy of the sword fragment as a lure for you. Xenovia's face remained a mask of stoic zealotry, but a flicker of surprise registered in her eyes. The outsider's assessment was not only accurate but also delivered with a casual certainty that was unsettling. You have a keen sense for the supernatural, she conceded, her grip on her sword tightening. Information that a mere traveler should not possess. This only deepens my suspicion. You will accompany us to the church. We will deal with the fallen angel, retrieve the fragment, and then you will answer our questions. Naruto slowly shook his head. I don't think so. Is that a refusal? Xenovia's voice dropped, the temperature of the air around them seeming to plummet. The fog swirled more intensely, as if agitated by her rising power. It's a statement of fact, Naruto replied calmly. You're walking into a trap. The fallen angel is prepared for exorcists. It's woven the ambient despair of this town into a formidable defensive barrier around the church. Your holy Words will be significantly dampened the moment you step onto consecrated ground. It's an ironic, and rather clever, strategy. He's turned your own fortress against you. Irina scoffed. Nonsense. The power of the Lord protects us everywhere. No fallen angel can stand against the might of a wielder of a holy sword. Pride is a weakness your enemy will be happy to exploit, Naruto said, his gaze never leaving Xenovia. It has had weeks to prepare the battlefield. You have had moments. The tactical advantage is not yours. Xenovia drew her sword. The massive blade, Durandal, seemed to hum with latent power as it was revealed. Its polished surface reflecting the gray light with a cold, unforgiving sheen. It was a weapon of immense holy energy, a tool of destruction designed to eradicate beings of darkness. I have listened to enough of your cryptic warnings, outsider, she declared, her voice resonating with power. You speak with the knowledge of our enemy, which makes you either an ally of darkness or a fool who has dabbled in things beyond his comprehension. Either way, you are an obstacle. You will stand down, or you will be struck down. Make your choice. The air crackled with palpable tension. The few remaining townsfolk who had dared to watch from their windows quickly shuttered them, plunging the square into an even deeper silence, broken only by the oppressive tolling of the distant, muffled bell. Naruto sighed, a soft, weary sound. He pushed his chair back and rose to his feet in a single, fluid motion. He was taller than Xenovia, his presence suddenly expanding to fill the space. He reached for the cloth-wrapped object leaning against his chair, his movements unhurried, almost casual. I had hoped to avoid this, he said, his voice retaining its calm, low timbre. I truly did. But your faith makes you blind. It makes you reckless. He began to unwrap the cloth. As the layers fell away, a soft, golden light began to emanate from within, a warm, pure luminescence that seemed to push back against the oppressive fog. The light was gentle, yet it held an undercurrent of immense, unimaginable power. It felt ancient, holy, and utterly absolute. Xenovia's eyes widened, her unshakable composure finally cracking. The energy radiating from the object was unlike anything she had ever felt. It dwarfed the holy power of her own Durandal, making her legendary sword feel like a child's toy in comparison. It was a power that resonated with the very concept of holy, yet it was purer, more fundamental, as if it were the source from which all other holy powers were but pale reflections. The last of the wrappings fell away, revealing the sword within. It was a magnificent arming sword, perfectly proportioned. The blade was forged from a metal that seemed to capture and hold the light, glowing with a soft, internal incandescence. The cross guard was simple and elegant, and the pommel was set with a single, flawless sapphire that pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic light, like a sleeping heart. There were no grand inscriptions, no ostentatious decorations. Its beauty was in its perfect, sublime simplicity. This was Ascalon, the holy sword of the Dragon Slayer, the very blade wielded by Saint George. But it was more than that. In Naruto's hands, it was something else. What is that? Irina stammered, her bravado completely evaporating in the face of the sword's overwhelming presence. Xenovia's mind raced, cycling through every known holy sword, every sacred relic in the church's vast arsenal. None matched this blade. The power it exuded was on a level she couldn't comprehend. That sword, she breathed, her knuckles white as she gripped Durandal. It cannot be. It has had many names, Naruto said, his voice now holding a strange, resonant quality. As if the sword itself were speaking through him. He held it in a relaxed, one-handed grip, the point angled towards the ground. The golden light it cast illuminated his face, revealing an expression of profound melancholy. But its name is not what matters. What matters is its purpose. And its purpose is not to serve blind zealotry. Xenovia grit her teeth, her faith warring with the undeniable evidence of her senses. This man, this unknown variable, wielded a holy power that dwarfed her own. He was either a saint of unimaginable power or a heretic of the highest order. Her dogma allowed for no middle ground. Heresy. She roared, channeling her conviction into her next action. You dare to lecture me on faith while wielding a blade of unknown origin. I will reclaim that SWO. Road for the church and purify your soul with the light of Durandal. She charged. Her movement was a blur of blue and silver, closing the distance between them in an instant. She brought Durandal down in a massive, two-handed vertical slash. A blow meant to cleave a man in two. The air screamed as the holy blade descended, its power potent enough to vaporize a lesser devil on contact. Naruto didn't move from his spot. He simply raised Ascalon. The clash, when it came, was not the deafening clang of steel on steel that one would expect. Instead, there was a sound like the chiming of a celestial bell, a pure, resonant tone that seemed to vibrate in the very soul. A shockwave of pure energy erupted from the point of impact. The cobblestones beneath them cracked and shattered. The windows of the tavern behind Naruto exploded inwards. The fog was violently blasted away, creating a momentary, perfect sphere of clarity around the two combatants. Xenovia was thrown backwards, skidding across the stones. Her arms numb from the force of the impact. She stared in disbelief. She had put her full strength, the full holy power of Durandal, into that strike. And he had blocked it. He had blocked it with one hand. Without even taking a step back. Impossible, she whispered, her mind reeling. Naruto stood in the same spot. Ascalon held steady, its golden light undiminished. Your strength is considerable, he commented. His voice as calm as ever. But your technique is crude. You rely on overwhelming force. You swing your sword, but you do not wield it. You are a hammer, and you see everything as a nail. Enraged by his clinical, dismissive assessment, Xenovia surged forward again. She abandoned the single, powerful strikes for a flurry of blows, a whirlwind of steel and holy light. Durandal became a blur, each slash, thrust, and parry executed with superhuman speed and precision. She was a master of her craft, a prodigy of the church. And Naruto met every single blow. His movements were the epitome of efficiency. He didn't waste a single motion. A slight turn of the wrist, a small adjustment of his angle, a minimalist parry that used her own momentum against her. He was not blocking her attacks. He was redirecting them, nullifying them, turning her storm of aggression into a pointless dance. He moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic, Ascalon a seamless extension of his will. The golden blade and the silver behemoth wove a complex tapestry of light and sound, but it was a one-sided affair. Naruto was the artist. Xenovia was merely the paint being thrown at the canvas. You're fast, he admitted during a brief lull as she backed away, panting slightly. But you're loud. Your intentions are broadcast in every tense muscle, in every shift of your weight. You fight with anger. It makes you strong. But it makes you predictable. Silence. Xenovia yelled, her frustration mounting. This was not a fight. It was a lesson, and she was the chastised student. She refused to accept it. She poured more of her holy energy into Durandal, causing the massive blade to glow with a brilliant, white light. I fight for God. My conviction is my strength. She unleashed her signature technique. A devastating thrust that focused all of Durandal's holy power into a single, piercing point of light. It was an attack designed to punch through any defense, to purify any evil it touched. This time, Naruto moved. But not to dodge. He took a single step forward, into the path of the attack. At the last possible moment, he rotated Ascalon, not to block, but to catch her blade along the flat of his own. The two swords slid against each other, brilliant white light grinding against soft golden radiance. And then, something impossible happened. The brilliant white light of Durandal was absorbed. It flowed out of Xenovia's sword and into Ascalon, vanishing into the golden blade as if it were a river flowing into the ocean. The overwhelming power of her ultimate attack was simply gone. Xenovia froze, her eyes wide with shock and utter confusion. Her connection to Durandal felt momentarily severed, the holy power she had poured into it completely drained. The sword in her hands felt like a dead, heavy piece of metal. In that moment of stunned inaction, Naruto acted. He continued the fluid motion of the parry, stepping past her and lightly tapping the pommel of Ascalon against the back of her neck. It was a gentle tap, carrying no malice, but it sent a wave of paralyzing energy through her nervous system. Xenovia's body went rigid. Her arms fell to her sides. Her fingers losing their grip on Durandal. The great sword clattered onto the cobblestones with a deafening finality. She stood, frozen, unable to move a muscle, her eyes locked in a stare of horrified disbelief. She was completely, utterly at his mercy. Naruto stepped back, his own sword now held loosely at his side. The fight, if it could be called that, was over. It had lasted less than a minute. Irina, who had been watching with a mixture of terror and awe, finally let out a choked cry and raised her own sword, her hands trembling. Get away from her, you monster. Naruto didn't even turn to look at her. Stay where you are, child, he said, his voice soft, but carrying an unmistakable command. This is not your fight. She is unharmed. The paralysis will wear off in a few minutes. He turned his attention back to the frozen Xenovia. He could see the storm in her eyes, the confusion, the rage, the shattered pride, and beneath it all, a flicker of fear. Her entire worldview, built on the unshakable foundation of her faith in the absolute power of the church, had just been demolished by a stranger with a golden sword and sad, blue eyes. You see, he said gently, the resonant quality returning to his voice. Your power, your faith, they are not absolute. They can be countered. They can be consumed. The world is far more complex than the simple doctrines your leaders have taught you. He bent down and picked up Durandal, the massive sword surprisingly light in his grasp. He held it for a moment, his gaze analytical. This is a powerful sword. A piece of the original. Reforged and imbued with centuries of faith. But it is incomplete. It is loud. It screams its purpose. It lacks subtlety. He held it out, offering the hilt to the still frozen Xenovia. A sword is a tool. It is only as good as the hand that wields it, and only as wise as the mind that guides the hand. You have the strength, but you lack the wisdom. His gaze lifted towards the ominous silhouette of the church. Its spire, now faintly visible as the fog, pushed back by their battle, slowly began to reclaim the square. Your enemy is waiting. It felt the surge of holy power from your little tantrum. It knows you're here. And now, it knows you're weakened, he stated. You can continue to see me as an enemy, a heretic to be purged, or you can accept that your mission, as you planned it, has already failed. The choice is yours. Xenovia Quarta. He placed Durandal on the ground at her feet. He then turned and walked back to his table, leaving her standing there, a paralyzed statue in the center of the broken square. He casually picked up his now cold mug of cider and took a sip, his posture once again relaxed, as if the life or death battle had been nothing more than a minor interruption to his afternoon. The fog swirled back in, shrouding the scene once more. The silence that returned was deeper, more profound than before. It was the silence of shattered certainties and the birth of a terrifying new reality. For Xenovia Quarta, the zealot, the world was no longer black and white. It was now a swirling, uncertain gray, and at its center stood a man with golden hair and a sword that had devoured the light. The first tremors of a paradigm shift had shaken her to her core, and her journey into a much larger, more complicated world had just begun. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. Echoes in the consecrated dark. The paralysis receded not like a wave, but like the slow, agonizing thawing of frozen limbs. It began with a twitch in Xenovia's fingers, a flicker of an eyelid, and then a great, shuddering gasp as her lungs remembered their function. She stumbled, her legs still numb and incooperative, and would have collapsed onto the cracked cobblestones had Irina not rushed forward to support her. The younger girl's face a mess of relief and lingering terror. The heavy weight of Durandal, lying inert at her feet, was a testament to her utter and absolute defeat. Naruto remained seated at his table, a silent observer silhouetted against the weak light of the tavern. He had not moved, had not spoken a word since he'd laid her sword down. He simply waited, his patience a palpable force, as oppressive in its own way as the returning fog. He was giving her the dignity of choice, allowing her to process the complete deconstruction of her reality on her own terms. The gesture was, infuriatingly, one of respect. Xenovia, are you all right? Irina's voice was a high-pitched squeak, her grip on Xenovia's arm tight. Xenovia pushed her away, not with malice, but with an instinctual need for space. She stood on unsteady feet, her gaze fixed on the man who had defeated her without effort, without malice, without even seeming to consider it a true fight. Every tenet of her faith, every lesson drilled into her since childhood, screamed that he was a heretic, a blasphemer wielding a stolen, unknown power. Yet, the energy that had flowed from his sword, the light that had consumed Durandal's holy might, had felt pure. It was a terrifying paradox that her mind, trained in the absolute dichotomies of good and evil, could not reconcile. Her pride, a fortress she had built around herself for years, lay in ruins. She had been so certain, so absolute in her conviction. Now, she was adrift in a sea of doubt. To charge into that church now, as he'd said, would be suicide. The fallen angel would be waiting. And her primary weapon had been proven fallible. Her mission, as she had intended to execute it, was a failure before it had even truly begun. With a stiffness that had nothing to do with the lingering paralysis, she forced her head to turn towards the looming, shadowy form of the church. He was right. She could feel it now, a subtle wrongness in the air, a spiritual dissonance that her battle lust and righteous fury had previously blinded her to. The consecrated ground felt tainted, sour. She swallowed the bitter taste of humiliation. The mission came first. The retrieval of the Excalibur fragment was paramount. Her personal feelings were an indulgence the church could not afford. Forcing the words out through a throat tight with resentment, she spoke, her voice a harsh rasp in the damp air. What is your plan? It was not an offer of alliance. It was an admission of necessity. A concession, but not a surrender. Naruto's posture didn't change, but she felt his piercing blue eyes on her. The plan is simple, he said, his voice calm and measured, carrying easily through the fog. We don't give the enemy the battle he expects. A frontal assault na prepared position as tactical idiocy. He's turned the church into a fortress, using the ambient holy energy as a power source for his own profane magic. He expects exorcists to come through the front door, armed with faith and holy water. We will not be so predictable. He finally rose, moving with that same liquid grace that had so effortless undone her. He walked towards them, his footsteps making almost no sound on the stones. He stopped a few paces away, his gaze sweeping over both of them, analytical and discerning. There are catacombs beneath this town, he stated. An old network of tunnels from before the current church was built. One of them leads directly into the crypt, beneath the main altar. It is a path of the dead, a place where the ambient sanctity of the church above is weakest. His corruption will be less potent there. We will enter through the back door, while he waits for us at the front. Irina looked nervously at Xenovia, who remained silent, her expression a mask of stony contemplation. How do you know about these catacombs? Irina asked, her voice a mixture of suspicion and genuine curiosity. I've been in this town for 3 days, Naruto replied, as if that explained everything. I don't just sit and drink cider. I listen. I watch. I explore. The old fisherman who speaks to the ghosts of his drowned crewmates knows the entrance. The mad woman who weaves nets from her own hair sings of the tunnels in her rhymes. People's stories, their madness and their grief, are a map, if you know how to read it. His words painted a picture of a man who saw the world on a level they could barely comprehend. He didn't just analyze threats, he inhaled the very essence of a place, absorbing its secrets through osmosis. Xenovia finally bent down and retrieved Durandal. The greatsword felt heavy and foreign in her hand, its familiar, comforting aura of power now feeling muted, lesser. She sheathed it with a sharp, decisive click. We will follow your plan, she conceded. The words tasting like ash. But know this. This is a temporary truce, born of necessity. Once the fallen angel is dealt with and the Excalibur fragment is secured, you and I have matters to conclude. You will answer for your possession of that blade. Naruto offered a small, almost imperceptible nod. Fair enough. One enemy at a time. He turned, the motion a clear dismissal of the topic, and gestured towards a dark, narrow alley between the tavern and a neighboring chandlery. The entrance is this way. Stay close. And stay silent. Your holy energy signatures are like bonfires in the dark. Try to suppress them. Walk softly, and listen more than you look. He melted into the darkness of the alley. For a moment, the two exorcists stood alone in the square. Xenovia. Can we trust him? Irina whispered, her hand resting on the hilt of her own sword. He humiliated you. And that sword he carries, it's not in any of the church's records. No, we cannot trust him, Xenovia replied, her voice low and firm. Her resolve hardening once more. But we can use him. He is clearly powerful, and his knowledge of the situation surpasses our own. We will observe him. We will learn the nature of his power. And when the time is right, we will deal with him. For now, he is a tool, just as Durandal is. And I will use any tool necessary to complete my mission. With that, she squared her shoulders and followed Naruto into the oppressive darkness, Irina scurrying close behind her. The entrance to the catacombs was hidden beneath a rotten cellar door in the back of the abandoned chandlery. The air that billowed out as Naruto heaved the heavy wooden doors open was foul, a thick, cloying stench of stagnant water, mildew, and something else, something ancient and deeply unpleasant, like disturbed grave dirt. Naruto produced a small, smooth stone from his pocket. He murmured a single word to it, a syllable that seemed to hang in the air like a struck chord, and the stone began to glow with a soft, clean white light. It wasn't the brilliant, aggressive radiance of holy power, but a gentle, neutral luminescence. He handed it to Irina. Hold this. It will light the way. Without alerting every sensitive creature in these tunnels to our presence. He then dropped down into the darkness, landing with a soft thud on the damp earth below. Xenovia, after a moment's hesitation, followed. Her descent far less graceful. Irina came last, holding the light stone aloft, her eyes wide with trepidation. The tunnels were a claustrophobic nightmare of rough-hewn earth and crumbling brick. The air was cold and heavy, thick with the weight of the earth above and the forgotten dead that surrounded them. Water dripped from the low ceiling in a maddening, irregular rhythm, each drop echoing endlessly in the oppressive silence. The walls were lined with burial niches, many of them collapsed, revealing splintered bone and scraps of rotted cloth. Naruto moved with a silent, predatory confidence, his senses seemingly piercing the gloom far better than the stone's light. He navigated the labyrinthine passages without a moment's hesitation, his head occasionally tilting, as if listening to whispers no one else could hear. Xenovia and Irina followed, their own enhanced senses on high alert. They could feel it now, the subtle but pervasive corruption that had seeped down from the church above. It was a greasy, spiritual film that coated everything, making their skin crawl. It tried to worm its way into their minds, whispering of doubt and despair. Xenovia found herself clenching her fists, forcing the profane whispers out with sheer willpower, but it was a constant, draining effort. Naruto, however, seemed utterly unaffected, moving through the tainted atmosphere as if it were a spring breeze. After what felt like an eternity of silent, tense walking, Naruto held up a hand, bringing them to a halt. "We're close," he whispered, his voice barely disturbing the air. "The crypt is just ahead. The corruption is strongest here. It's feeding on the residual sanctity of the bodies interred here. Be ready." He crept forward to the end of the tunnel, which opened into a larger chamber. He peered around the edge, his body perfectly still. Xenovia moved up beside him, her hand on Durandal's hilt. The sight that greeted them was a portrait of calculated blasphemy. They were in the church's main crypt. A large, vaulted chamber directly beneath the nave. Stone sarcophagi, bearing the likenesses of long-dead bishops and knights, lined the walls. But the sacred space had been hideously desecrated. The stone floor was covered in a complex, pulsating network of glowing red lines, an enormous transmutation circle drawn in what looked disturbingly like fresh blood. In the center of the circle, floating in the air, was the source of the corruption, a jagged, shard-like piece of a sword, no longer than a man's forearm. It was unmistakably a fragment of Excalibur, but its holy light was being strangled, warped by a sickly black aura that clung to it like a shroud. But that was not the most horrific part. Suspended in the air above the circle, held by writhing tendrils of pure shadow, were the townsfolk of Brekalon. There were dozens of them, men, women, and children, their bodies limp, their faces slack with unconsciousness. Faint streams of silvery white energy, their life force, were being drawn from them, flowing down into the corrupted Excalibur fragment, feeding it, empowering the profane ritual. Standing beside the circle, his back to them, was a figure clad in elegant, dark robes. He had a single pair of black, feathered wings, the mark of a low to mid-class fallen angel. He was humming a jaunty, cheerful tune, a sound so utterly incongruous the horror surrounding him that it was profoundly obscene. "Ah, the vintage of mortal terror is just so piquant," the fallen angel said, turning as if he had known they were there all along. His face was handsome in a cruel, sharp way, with intelligent, mocking eyes and a smile that never reached them. It has a much more complex flavor profile than simple faith. "I am Sariel, by the way. It's so rude to entertain guests without a proper introduction." He gave them a theatrical bow. "And you must be the church's little hunting dogs. Xenovia Quarta, wielder of the destructive holy sword, Durandal." And Irina Shido, the other one. I must confess, I'm a little disappointed. I was expecting someone of a higher caliber. A paladin, perhaps. Or at least a seraph-blessed exorcist. But they send children. How economical of them. Xenovia's eyes blazed with righteous fury. Sariel, release those people and surrender the holy relic. Your blasphemy ends now. Sariel chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. My dear, my blasphemy has only just begun. This little backwater was the perfect place for my experiment. Far from the prying eyes of Michael, Azazel, and the rest of the dreary old men who run the world. I'm creating something new here. A fusion of holy and unholy power, fueled by the very essence of mortal life. This Excalibur fragment will be the heart of a new kind of weapon. My weapon. His gaze then drifted past the two girls, landing on Naruto as he stepped out from the tunnel's shadow. Sariel's mocking smile faltered for the first time, his brow knitting in genuine confusion. And who are you? He asked, his tone losing its playful edge. You don't smell of angel, devil, or fallen. Your energy signature is quiet. Too quiet. Like a deep ocean. What strange creature has stumbled into my little theater? Let the people go, Sariel, Naruto said, his voice flat and cold. Ascalon was now in his hand, its gentle golden light a stark, defiant contrast to the pulse aiding red and black of the ritual chamber. This is your only warning. Sariel stared at the golden sword, and a flicker of something that might have been recognition, or perhaps instinctual fear, crossed his face. That sword, I have not seen its like before. It feels old, primordial. You are no mere human, are you? I'm the one who's going to end this, Naruto replied simply. Sariel threw back his head and laughed. A sound that was now sharp and brittle. A bold claim. You think you can challenge me here? In my sanctuary. This entire church is my domain now. The holy ground you walk on answers to me. The faith of generations is my battery. As he spoke, the shadowy tendrils holding the villagers writhed and thickened. The red lines of the transmutation circle flared, and the very stones of the crypt seemed to groan. Xenovia and Irina both gasped, feeling the oppressive weight of the corrupted holy power intensify tenfold. It was like trying to breathe underwater. Their own holy energies sputtered, dampened and suppressed by the overwhelming profanity of the place. You see, Sariel taunted, spreading his arms wide. Your God has no power here. Your prayers are empty echoes in a house that now belongs to me. You are lambs for the slaughter. Shadows detached from the walls, coalescing into monstrous, vaguely canine shapes with glowing red eyes. They snarled, their forms unstable and shifting, and began to stalk forward, surrounding the trio. Naruto. Irina cried out, her voice trembling as she raised her sword, its holy light struggling to even form. He was right, Xenovia grit out, planting her feet and raising Durandal, though it felt like she was lifting a mountain. Our power is being smothered. Don't fight the environment, Naruto said, his voice cutting through their rising panic. He hadn't taken his eyes off Sariel. Fight the enemy. Xenovia, your Durandal is a weapon of pure destruction. Forget finesse. I need you to be a battering ram. That fragment is the heart of his power. Drive a wedge between him and it. Create a disruption, no matter how small. He then turned his head slightly towards Irina. Irina, your abilities are based on faith and purification. You can't purify this whole room, but you can purify a single point. Focus all your energy, not on your blade, but on the ground beneath my feet. Consecrate a single patch of stone. Can you do that? The commands were so precise, so confident, that they momentarily overrode the girl's fear. Irina nodded, her expression firming with determination. Xenovia gave a curt, sharp nod, her eyes narrowed in concentration. And what will you be doing? Xenovia asked. Naruto's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, a fleeting expression that held no humor, only a chilling certainty. Me, he said, as Sariel sent the first wave of shadow beasts loping towards them. I'm going to cut the puppet master's strings. With a surge of will, Xenovia poured what power she could muster into Durandal. The blade glowed with a dull, struggling white light, and she charged forward, not at Sariel, but at the space between the fallen angel and the floating Excalibur fragment. She roared, a cry of pure, defiant fury, and swung the greatsword in a wide, horizontal arc. Simultaneously, Irina stabbed her sword into the ground, closing her eyes and praying, her lips moving silently. A small circle of brilliant, pure white light, no bigger than a dinner plate, erupted on the floor where Naruto stood, instantly vaporizing the corrupted red lines within it. For the first time since entering the crypt, Naruto stood on truly hallowed ground. The effect was instantaneous and explosive. Freed from the suffocating blanket of Sariel's corruption, the power of Ascalon, which Naruto had been consciously suppressing, was unleashed. A pillar of pure, untainted golden light erupted from him, so bright and so potent that it dwarfed everything in the room. It was not the aggressive, judgmental light of the church's holy power, but something more fundamental, more absolute. It was the light of creation itself, a light of pure, conceptual authority. The shadow beasts that had been leaping towards him dissolved into nothingness before they even got close, their profane essence utterly unmade by the golden radiance. Sariel, who had been focused on Xenovia's disruptive charge, spun around, his eyes wide-eyed with utter shock and disbelief as he was struck by the wave of golden energy. He screamed, not in pain, but in terror. What is this power? He shrieked, his own dark energy recoiling as if struck by a physical blow. This isn't holy power. This is divine. Naruto stood in the center of his consecrated circle, Ascalon held aloft. The sword's gentle glow had intensified into a miniature sun. The sad, melancholy look in his eyes was gone, replaced by an expression of absolute, tranquil focus. He looked like an avenging angel from a forgotten, more powerful scripture. The battle had been joined. The feints and strategies were over. Xenovia's charge was faltering, the sheer pressure of Sariel's domain pushing back against her. The fallen angel, though terrified, was beginning to rally his power, drawing more and more life force from the captive villagers to counter the unexpected threat. Naruto knew he had only a moment before Sariel stabilized the ritual and turned his full, desperate power on them. He needed to end this. Now, Xenovia, he called out, his voice resonating with the power flowing through him. I need one clean shot. He's going to try and intercept you with everything he has. You must not falter. You must believe in your sword, not your god. Push through. It was the ultimate test. He was asking her to place her trust, her very life, not in the dogma she had followed blindly, but in her own strength and in the guidance of the heretic she'd sworn to defeat. For a heartbeat, Xenovia's violet eyes met Naruto's glowing blue ones across the chaotic chamber. In that instant, she saw no arrogance, no deception, only an unshakable, absolute certainty. She saw a warrior, a commander, a king. Gritting her teeth so hard her jaw ached, she made her choice. She let out another primal scream, channeling the last of her reserves, her pride, her anger, her confusion, everything, into one final, desperate charge. She aimed Durandal like a lance, straight at the corrupted Excalibur fragment. As Naruto predicted, Sariel panicked. He couldn't allow the core of his ritual to be struck. Ignoring Naruto for the moment, he gathered the swirling shadows and stolen life force into a single massive spear of black and red energy and hurled it directly at the charging Xenovia. It was a blow designed to utterly annihilate her, an overwhelming torrent of death and despair. Xenovia's eyes widened as the attack rushed to meet her, knowing she could not possibly withstand it. But she did not stop. She did not falter. She had committed. Just as the spear of darkness was about to impact her, a flash of gold so brilliant it wiped out all other light filled the crypt. Naruto, moving with impossible speed, had crossed the distance. He didn't block the attack. He didn't dodge it. He simply swung Ascalon. The golden blade met the spear of darkness, and for a silent, breathtaking moment, there was no sound, no explosion. There was only the sublime, terrifying sight of the darkness being unwritten from existence, consumed and utterly nullified by the pure, conceptual power of the holy sword of the God King. The golden light washed over everything, a cleansing, final fire. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. A Truce of Shattered Faith. The golden light did not fade, it was inhaled. With a final, soft chime that resonated in the very marrow of their bones, the torrential power that had filled the crypt flowed back into the blade in Naruto's hand, leaving behind a silence that was more profound than the preceding chaos. Ascalon returned to its gentle, lambent glow, its oft light caressing the now purified stones of the crypt. The change was absolute. The pulsating, blood-red lines of the transmutation circle were gone, scoured from the floor as if they had never been. The cloying, greasy film of corruption had vanished, replaced by the clean, cold scent of ancient stone and damp earth. The shadowy tendrils that had held the townsfolk captive had evaporated, and one by one, the people of Brekalon slumped gently to the floor, unconscious but breathing steadily, their life force their own once more. The black aura strangling the Excalibur fragment had been shattered, and the holy shard now hovered in the air, radiating a pure, silver-white light, its song of power clear and untainted. Sariel, the arrogant fallen angel, was simply gone. There was no body, no ash, no lingering trace of his profane energy. He had not been killed in the conventional sense. He had been unmade, his existence erased from the tapestry of reality by a power so fundamental that it predated the concepts of angels and devils. Xenovia stood frozen mid-charge, Durandal still held aloft. The spear of darkness that had been moments from ending her life was a dissipating memory. Shish. He stared at the empty space where Sariel had been, then at the peacefully unconscious villagers, and finally, her wide, disbelieving violet eyes fell upon Naruto. He stood in the center of the crypt, the sole point of stillness in the aftermath of a hurricane. He was breathing calmly, his posture relaxed, Ascalon held loosely in a one-handed grip. He was not triumphant, not arrogant, not even relieved. He simply was. The expression on his face was the one she had first seen outside the tavern, one of a deep, abiding melancholy, the look of a man who had witnessed too much and shouldered a burden too heavy for any single soul. Irina was on her knees, her own sword lying forgotten beside her. She wasn't looking at the villagers or the reclaimed relic. She was staring at Naruto with an expression of pure, unadulterated awe. The kind a mortal might reserve for the direct manifestation of a god. The doctrinal lines of her faith had been blurred into non-existence. She had just witnessed a miracle. But it did not fit into any scripture she had ever read. With a soft scraping sound, Xenovia lowered Durandal, the tip of the massive blade coming to rest on the stone floor. The strength fled from her arms, and the greatsword, which had felt like an extension of her will mere moments ago, now felt like an anchor, its weight a crushing reminder of her own inadequacy. She had charged in, a weapon of faith, and had been found wanting. She would have died, her mission a catastrophic failure, had it not been for the intervention of the very man she had declared a heretic. Her entire life had been built on a foundation of absolutes. God is good, devils are evil, the church is the arbiter of truth, and its holy weapons are the ultimate instruments of divine will. In the space of an hour, every single one of those pillars had been pulverized into dust. The man before her wielded a divine power that dwarfed her own, a power that seemed to operate on a different plane of existence entirely. He had lectured her on tactics like a seasoned general, and he had saved her life with a casual display of might that bordered on the incomprehensible. He was not her enemy. He was not her ally. He was a walking, breathing refutation of her entire reality. Naruto moved then, his boots making soft sounds on the stone as he walked towards the floating Excalibur fragment. He reached out and took it. The silver-white light of the relic bathing his hand but not harming him. As the fragment settled into his palm, Ascalon, still held in his other hand, pulsed with a brighter, warmer golden light. A low, harmonic hum filled the air as the two holy objects resonated with one another, a reunion of long-lost kin. They recognize each other, Naruto said, his voice quiet, as if speaking to himself. Pieces of the whole. They want to be one again. He turned to face the two exorcists. Irina flinched under his gaze, while Xenovia forced herself to stand straighter, meeting his eyes with a turmoil ill of emotions she couldn't begin to name. What are you? Xenovia's voice was hoarse, stripped of its zealous fire, leaving only a raw, desperate need for understanding. It was not a challenge. It was a plea. Naruto looked at her, his blue eyes holding a depth of ancient weariness. I am a man a long way from home, he said, the answer both simple and impossibly complex. My world was different. We didn't have gods or devils as you know them. We had chakra. We had shinobi. We had wars that stained the land red. He paused, his gaze becoming distant, lost in a memory a world away. I was a guardian, a protector. But I failed. In a final, cataclysmic battle, the world I knew was unmade. In the last moments, I was cast adrift, sent away by a power I barely understood. I have been wandering through the spaces between worlds for a very long time. I am a relic, Xenovia. A ghost from a dead reality. Irina gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The sheer, crushing loneliness in his words was a tangible thing. To be the last remnant of an entire world, it was a fate more terrible than any hell she could imagine. And the sword. Xenovia pressed, her knuckles white where she gripped Durandal's hilt. Ascalon. It is not a holy sword forged by God, is it? No, Naruto confirmed. He lifted the golden blade, its light seeming to soften in response to his melancholy. In my world, there was a being of immense power. The progenitor of all chakra. Its body was sealed away, but its power was a source of endless conflict. This sword was forged from the very concept of its authority. It is not holy in the way you understand it. It doesn't draw power from your God or from faith. It is an instrument of absolute, conceptual power. It doesn't banish darkness, it commands the light. It doesn't destroy evil, it affirms reality. What it cuts is not merely flesh and bone, but existence itself. Against Sariel, I did not strike him down. I simply ended his narrative. The explanation was so esoteric, so far beyond the ken of their theology, that it left them speechless. He spoke of rewriting reality as if discussing the weather. We must report this, Irina stammered, falling back on her training. On the familiar chain of command. The Vatican, the archangels, they must be told. And what will you tell them? Naruto asked, his tone gentle but firm. That you were defeated by a mid-tier fallen angel. That you were saved by an unknown man from another dimension wielding a weapon that operates outside the established laws of heaven and hell. Do you think they will believe you? Or will they brand you as heretics, charlatans, or worse, traitors who have been corrupted? Xenovia's face paled. He was right. Her mission report would read like the ravings of a lunatic. She had failed to defeat the enemy on her own, failed to retrieve the relic without aid, and had borne witness to a power that defied their most sacred doctrines. She would be interrogated, her sanity questioned, her faith scrutinized. Durandal would likely be taken from her. She would be disgraced, her life's purpose rendered meaningless. Your world is built on a very delicate balance of power, Naruto continued, showing a startling grasp of their political and religious landscape. Heaven, Grigori, and the devils are locked in a cold war. The sudden appearance of a player, like me, an unknown variable with this level of power, would shatter that balance. It would invite investigation, fear, and aggression from all sides. They would try to control me, use me, or destroy me. And I have no interest in fighting their wars for them. He looked down at the Excalibur fragment in his hand, then at Ascalon. My only concern is finding the other pieces of this sword. Ascalon resonates with them. It tells me they are not mere weapons. They are keys. To what? I don't yet know. Perhaps a way home. Or perhaps just a way to understand why I am here. A new path, a terrifying and uncertain one, began to form in Xenovia's mind. To return to the church was to face disgrace and the potential loss of everything she was. Her faith was already shattered. What was the point in returning to the institution that had given her that fragile, flawed belief system? But to wander alone was unthinkable. She was a soldier without a commander, a believer without a god. She looked at Naruto, at the quiet, immense power he held in check. At the profound sadness that seemed to be the core of his being. He was an anchor in the storm of her confusion. He had answers, even if they were answers to questions she hadn't known existed. Taking a deep breath, she made a decision. It was not born of faith, or loyalty, or even logic. It was born of the instinct of a warrior who recognizes a true master of the battlefield. The instinct of a lost soul reaching for the only solid thing in a world that had turned to liquid. She took a step forward and drove the point of Durandal into the stone floor, the sound ringing through the crypt. She let go of the hilt and went down on one knee, her head bowed. Xenovia. Irina cried out in shock. I cannot go back, Xenovia stated, her voice clear and resolved, though it trembled slightly. My faith has been proven to be a lie. My strength has been proven to be a pittance. My mission would have ended in my death and the damnation of these people. Everything I was is a falsehood. She lifted her head, her violet eyes burning with a new, terrifying intensity. It was not the fire of zealotry, but the focused flame of a forge, of something new being beaten into shape. I no longer serve the God of the Bible, for his power was absent here today. I will not serve a fallen angel, for you have shown them to be nothing. I will not serve the devils, for they are the enemies of mankind. She took another shaky breath. Until I can find a truth worth believing in, I will follow you. I will observe you. I will learn from you. I will offer you my sword, not as a subject to a king, but as a student to a master. Allow me and Irina to travel with you. We will help you find the other fragments. In return, teach us. Teach us the truth that lies beyond the dogma we were fed. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, an act of utter surrender that was simultaneously her first true act of free will. Naruto looked down at the kneeling, blue-haired zealot. Her pride cast aside like a broken shield. He saw not an enemy, not a convert, but a fellow lost soul, albeit one whose world had only just died, while his was a long-faded memory. He felt a pang of something he had not felt in a very long time, a flicker of connection, of shared purpose. Get up, he said, his voice softer than before. I am not a master, and I have no desire for students or followers. But if you wish to walk the same path for a time, I will not turn you away. Your strength will be useful. But be warned. The path I walk is a lonely one, and it leads to dangerous places. Xenovia looked up, relief and a dozen other complicated emotions warring in her eyes. She slowly rose to her feet, pulling Durandal from the floor. She did not sheath it. Instead, she held it in a guard position, but this time, it was not directed at him. It was directed at the world. Their truce had been forged. It was nearly dawn when they emerged from the church, a small, weary procession helping the groggy, disoriented townsfolk out into the clean, pre-dawn air. The fog had finally broken, and the sky was a canvas of deep indigo and pale gray, with the first hint of rose on the eastern horizon. The air was crisp and cold. As they guided the last of the villagers out, a woman was waiting for them on the church steps. She was older than the exorcists but younger than the town elders, with kind, knowing eyes and hands stained with the greens and browns of herbs. A long, gray braid fell over her shoulder. She was Alara, the town's herbalist, a woman who dealt in remedies of the earth rather than prayers to the heavens. She ignored the frightened babbling of the rescued townsfolk and the wary stances of Xenovia and Irina. Her gaze went directly to Naruto, and there was no fear in it, only a deep, placid curiosity. The fever has broken, she said, her voice calm and melodic. The evil that was leeching the life from this town is gone. It was you. Again, it was not a question. We all played a part, Naruto answered, deflecting the credit. Alara's eyes flickered to Ascalon, which he now wore in a simple leather harness on his back, still wrapped in its mundane cloth. Some parts are larger than others, she murmured. Her gaze returned to his face, and her expression was one of profound empathy. You carry a great stillness within you, stranger. But it is the stillness of a deep, cold lake. I sense no malice in you, only a sorrow so vast it could drown the stars. Xenovia and Irina looked at the woman in surprise. She spoke of his inner state with the same certainty with which he had assessed their tactical situation. My house is warm, Alara offered, gesturing down the street towards a small cottage from which a thin tendril of smoke was rising. There is broth on the hearth and clean bandages for any wounds. You have given our people back to us. Let us offer you a moment of peace in return. You and your new friends. Naruto looked at Xenovia, whose face was a mask of exhaustion and lingering conflict, and at Irina, who looked ready to collapse from the emotional and spiritual whiplash of the night. He, too, felt the pull of a deeper weariness, not of the body, but of the soul. He gave Alara a small, grateful nod. We would be honored. Thank you. Later, as the sun finally crested the distant mountains, casting long shadows across the small town, the F.R. of them sat around a crackling fire in Alara's cozy, herb-scented cottage. The rescued villagers had been returned to their families, and a fragile sense of normalcy was beginning to return to Brekalon. Xenovia was meticulously cleaning Durandal with an oiled cloth, her movements precise and meditative. It was a familiar ritual, but her relationship with the blade had changed forever. It was no longer a perfect gift from God, but a flawed tool of steel and power that she needed to understand on her own terms. Irina, wrapped in a thick wool blanket, had finally succumbed to exhaustion and was asleep in a chair. Her face peaceful for the first time since they had arrived. Alara handed Naruto a steaming mug of herbal tea. She sat across from him, her gaze thoughtful. She had not asked for the details of the battle, for the names of angels or the nature of their swords. She seemed to understand the world through a different, more fundamental lens. Naruto held the Excalibur fragment in his lap, its soft white light a stark contrast to the dancing orange flames of the hearth. He stared into the fire, his thoughts 1,000 miles and 1,000 worlds away. He had a new purpose, finding the keys, and now, unexpectedly, he had companions. A broken zealot and her naive apprentice. It was a complication he had not sought, but one he had accepted. Perhaps, a small part of him whispered, it was better than walking alone. He looked out the small cottage window at the rising sun painting the sky in brilliant hues. It was a new day in a strange, unfamiliar world. His path was still uncertain. But for the first time in a very long time, he was not entirely alone on it. And in the quiet understanding of the herbalist's gaze, the grudging respect of the blue-haired warrior, and the assent admiration of the girl sleeping by the fire, the faintest seeds of a new kind of bond were beginning to take root in the barren soil of his soul. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Gilded Cage and the Scholar's Gambit. The week that followed their departure from Brekalon was a study in transition. They journeyed south, away from the unforgiving coast and the lingering scent of salt and sorrow, into the rolling green heartlands of the kingdom. The oppressive fog was replaced by a crisp, autumnal sunlight that set the forests ablaze in hues of gold and crimson. The sky, vast and achingly blue, was a revelation to Xenovia and Irina, who had spent so much of their lives under the gray, weeping skies of northern Europe. Their internal landscapes were changing as well. The rigid hierarchical dynamic of senior and junior exorcist had dissolved, leaving a vacuum of uncertainty. Xenovia, stripped of her dogmatic certainty, had become quieter, more watchful. She observed Naruto constantly, her violet eyes trying to deconstruct his every movement, every seemingly casual comment, searching for the source of the impossible power and tranquil confidence he possessed. She was a tactician studying a new form of warfare. One waged not with swords and faith, but with an unnerving depth of perception and a quiet, unshakable will. Irina, on the other hand, had blossomed. Freed from the immediate pressure of Xenovia's stern authority, her natural curiosity and inherent optimism resurfaced. She treated Naruto not as a heretic or a savior, but as a living, breathing history book from a land of myth. During the long days on the road and the quiet nights around the campfire, she would pepper him with questions, her eagerness a stark contrast to Xenovia's silent analysis. In your world, did you have cities this big? She asked one evening, as they looked down from a ridge upon the distant, twinkling lights of a town nestled in a valley. Naruto was tending to the fire, the flames reflecting in his calm, blue eyes. Bigger, he replied, his voice a low rumble. Cities of steel and glass that scraped the clouds, filled with more people than this entire kingdom. But they were louder. The silence here is a rare thing. You can hear the world breathe. And the chakra you spoke of. Irina pressed, leaning forward, her chin resting on her knees. Was it like magic? Or our holy power? Neither. Naruto said, prodding a log with a stick, sending a shower of sparks into the night air. It was the energy of life itself, a union of physical and spiritual essence. It could be molded for creation or destruction. It could heal the mortally wounded, or level a mountain. It was a tool, like any other. The intent of the wielder gave it its morality. He paused, a shadow passing over his features. Most often, that intent was for war. Xenovia, sitting slightly apart, polishing Durandal with a practiced, almost obsessive motion, listened to it all. His words chipped away at the foundations of her black and white world. Power was not inherently holy or unholy, it was merely power. Intent was the deciding factor. It was a simple concept, yet it felt like a profound, dangerous heresy. On the morning of the 8th day, Naruto, who had been riding in a comfortable silence at the head of their small procession, reined in his horse. They were on a high road, overlooking a vast basin. In the center of it, Nestled in a bend of a wide, glittering river, was a city of breathtaking scale and beauty. Ethelgerd. It was a vision of white stone and golden spires, a city built to inspire awe and proclaim the dominance of both crown and church. A massive curtain wall, studded with proud, banner-flapping towers, encircled it. Within, the buildings rose in tiers of wealth and influence, from the sprawling red-tiled roofs of the merchant districts near the river to the elegant, slate-roofed manors of the nobility on the higher slopes. And dominating it all, its three gilded spires catching the morning sun like brilliant lances, was the grand cathedral of the Archangel Michael, a testament to the church's immense power in this land. The air, even from this distance, was not still. It carried the faint, composite hum of 100,000 lives, a sound of commerce, prayer, and ambition. Wow, Irina breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. I've seen Rome, but this is like something from a storybook. Don't be deceived by the beauty, Xenovia murmured, her gaze analytical and hard. A city like this is a predator. It chews up the weak and unfortunate. Every one of those spires and banners represents a faction, a power base. The church, the royal court, the merchant guilds, the noble houses, they are all in a constant, silent war with one another. It's a different kind of battlefield. But just as deadly. Naruto nodded in agreement with her assessment. She's right. A place like this runs on secrets and influence, not faith and steel. His gaze, however, was fixed on a specific point within the city, a cluster of elegant buildings on the highest tier, just below the cathedral itself. His eyes narrowed slightly. And the next fragment is in the heart of the serpent's nest. You can feel it? Xenovia asked, her hand instinctively going to Durandal's hilt. I can, Naruto confirmed. It's not in the cathedral, which would have been the logical place. The signature is muted, shielded. It's in one of the noble manors in the upper district. The Valerius estate. House Valerius. Xenovia's brow furrowed in concentration, accessing the political knowledge drilled into her by the church. They are an old, respected house. Not particularly pious, but not heretical either. They are known for their vast wealth, derived from ancient land holdings and shrewd investments. And, for their collection. Collection? Irina asked. Antiquities, Xenovia clarified. Rumor has it that the family has been collecting historical and supernatural artifacts for centuries. They possess one of the largest private libraries and vaults on the continent. If anyone were to acquire an Excalibur fragment as a collector's piece, it would be them. Naruto's gaze swept over the city's formidable walls and the clear lines of sight from the watchtowers. A frontal assault is out of the question. Even if we could fight our way through the household guard, the city Washington, TCH and the church's knights would be upon us in minutes. We would be branded as thieves and murderers, hunted across the entire kingdom. So we can't fight our way in, Irina said, thinking aloud. How do we get to it? We get invited, Naruto said simply, turning his horse to begin the descent towards the city gates. House Valerius is known for its collection. And collectors are always looking for new acquisitions. We will give them a reason to want to see us. The contrast between the city's exterior and interior was stark. Outside the walls, there was grandeur and order. Inside, the lower districts were a chaotic, vibrant, and overwhelming assault on the senses. The air was thick with the smells of baking bread, roasting meats, exotic spices from the river port, sawdust from a carpenter's shop, and the ever-present cloying scent of the overcrowded river. The streets were a river of humanity. Rough-looking dockworkers, richly dressed merchants with their armed guards, pious monks in drab robes. Street urchins darting through legs like minnows, and women haggling at stalls piled high with colorful vegetables, shimmering silks, and foreign trinkets. Irina was captivated, her head swiveling in every direction, trying to take it all in. Xenovia was tense, her hand never straying far from her sword, her eyes scanning the rooftops and alleyways, assessing every potential threat. Naruto, however, was perfectly at ease. He navigated the throng with an innate sense of its ebb and flow, his presence commanding a small pocket of space around them without any overt action. He was absorbing the city, listening to its pulse, deciphering its language of commerce and desperation. He led them not to a grand inn, but to a respectable, quiet boarding house in a side street, one that catered to scholars and skilled artisans. After securing their rooms and stabling the horses, he gave them their instructions. Xenovia, you and Irina will secure supplies. Food, water, maps of the city. Be discreet. You are no longer representatives of the church. You are my apprentices. Try to look the part. He handed Xenovia a small pouch of coins, a mixture of gold and silver that seemed incongruous with his simple attire. Irina, keep your wonder in check. You look like a lamb waiting to be fleeced. Xenovia, keep her from talking to anyone. And you? Xenovia asked, her tone suspicious. I need to acquire an invitation. Naruto said. And for that, I need a key. Not every transaction in this city is made with coin. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd before she could ask another question. Naruto moved through the city with a purpose that belied his calm exterior. He bypassed the grand marketplaces and headed towards the seedier, more specialized districts. Places where information was the most valuable commodity. He found what he was looking for in a cramped, dusty shop filled with old scrolls, strange alchemical ingredients, and maps of places that no longer existed. The shopkeeper was a wizened old man with eyes that saw more than they let on. Naruto didn't browse. He walked to the counter and placed a small, intricately carved wooden bird on it. It was a piece he had whittled himself on the road, but the craftsmanship was flawless, the grain of the wood flowing perfectly with the lines of the creature. The old man picked it up, his eyes widening slightly as he felt the almost imperceptible hum of Naruto's own energy lingering within it. This is fine work, the man rasped. I am a craftsman, Naruto said. And a scholar. I hear that Lady Serafina Valerius is a woman of discerning taste. I have something she might be interested in, an ancient text from a land far to the east. But I do not know the proper channels to request an audience. The old man's eyes gleamed with understanding. The craftsman was offering a trade, a piece of his art, imbued with his unique essence, in exchange for information. It was a transaction of skill and respect. The Lady Valerius does not entertain unsolicited requests, the man said, stroking the wooden bird. However, her chief steward, a man named Marius, is a connoisseur of unique histories. He frequents the Scholar's Quill Tavern in the University District in the evenings. He is always listening for whispers of a new find. If your text is as genuine as your craft, he tapped the bird. Marius will see that his lady hears of it. Naruto nodded. Thank you for your time. He turned to leave. The bird, the old man called after him. It is a gift. It is a trade, Naruto replied without looking back. For good information. That evening, the trio convened in their modest room. Xenovia and Irina had succeeded in their task, and a detailed map of the city was spread out on the table. The Valerius estate is practically a fortress, Xenovia reported, pointing to a spot on the map. High walls, private guards, and it's said the entire estate is warded with magical defenses to protect the collection from thieves. Getting in without an invitation is impossible. Then it's a good thing we have one, Naruto said, placing a sealed letter on the table. It was embossed with the elaborate crest of House Valerius. Irina gasped. How did you? I had a conversation with her steward, Naruto said. I told him I possessed a copy of the Chronicles of the Sun Eater, a semi-mythy. Cal text from the fallen empire of my world. You mean you lied? Irina asked, looking scandalized. I told a truth he was predisposed to believe, Naruto corrected gently. The text is real. I have it memorized. I will simply have to transcribe a portion of it from memory as proof. It will be enough to pique the lady's interest. We have an appointment for tomorrow, after midday. The Valerius Tate was an oasis of calm and opulent beauty in the heart of the bustling city. Manicured gardens, filled with exotic plants and graceful statues, surrounded a mansion of breathtaking architecture. The air here was cleaner. The sounds of the city muted by high stone walls and the gentle burbling of marble fountains. They were met at the gate by the steward, Marius, a severe, hawk-nosed man who inspected Naruto with a critical eye. He led them through the grand entrance hall, their worn traveling clothes a stark contrast to the polished marble floors, priceless tapestries, and ancestral portraits that lined the walls. Xenovia and Irina both felt a sense of intimidation, of being utterly out of their element. Naruto, however, walked as if he were strolling through his own home, his gaze taking in the details not with awe, but with a quiet, analytical appreciation. They were shown into a vast, sun-drenched library. Bookshelves crafted from some dark, fragrant wood stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with thousands of leather-bound volumes. Glass cases displayed ancient scrolls, astrolabes, and other scholarly artifacts. The air smelled of old paper, leather, and beeswax. And sitting at a large, intricately carved mahogany desk, a slender hand resting on an open tome, was the lady of the house. Lady Serafina Valerius was a woman whose beauty was as sharp and refined as a well-honed blade. She had hair the color of molten silver, elegantly coiled and held in place with obsidian pins. Her eyes were a startling, intelligent gray, the color of a stormy sky, and they missed nothing. She wore a gown of deep emerald velvet that complemented her fair complexion, and around her neck was a simple silver necklace with a single, perfectly cut sapphire. She exuded an aura of aristocratic grace, formidable intellect, and a faint, intriguing sense of boredom, as if the world rarely presented her with anything truly stimulating. She looked up as they entered, her gray eyes sweeping over them. She dismissed Irina's nervous awe and Xenovia's guarded hostility with a glance, her full attention coming to rest on Naruto. A flicker of genuine interest sparked in those stormy depths. Master Marius informs me that you are a scholar from a distant land, she said, her voice a smooth, cultured alto. And that you claim to possess a fragment of a text that has been considered lost for millennia. A bold claim. The world is older and larger than most books account for, Lady Valerius, Naruto replied, his voice calm and respectful, yet holding no trace of subservience. Indeed, she mused, a small, knowing smile playing on her lips. She gestured to the chairs before her desk. Please. You have piqued my curiosity, which is no small feat. Show me what you have. Naruto did not present a scroll. Instead, he asked for parchment, a quill, and ink. For the next half an hour, in a silence broken only by the scratching of the quill, he transcribed a section of the text from memory. The language he wrote in was a thing of elegant, flowing symbols, completely alien to this world. Serafina watched him, her initial curiosity transforming into fascination. She was not just watching a man write. She was watching a living conduit to a lost age. His posture, the steady confidence of his hand, the sheer esoteric knowledge flowing from him, it was more captivating than any artifact in her collection. When he was finished, he pushed the parchment across the desk. Serafina picked it up, her long, graceful fingers handling it with care. She studied the alien script, her brow furrowed in intense concentration. The syntax, the structure, it has a linguistic kinship with pre-Lapsarian Enochian, but the root is far older, she murmured, more to herself than to them. This is authentic. Her stormy gray eyes lifted to meet Naruto's blue ones, and for the first time, he saw the full force of her intellect unleashed. This text is not the reason you are here. The statement hung in the air, sharp and undeniable. Xenovia tensed, her hand dropping to her sword. Serafina's gaze flickered to Xenovia's hand and then back to Naruto, a faint, amused smile touching her lips. Please. This is a library, not a battlefield. Your companion is a wielder of Durandal, and the younger one radiates the naive faith of a fresh recruit. You are no mere scholar, and you did not come all this way simply to share a piece of forgotten lore with me. Her gaze became piercing. You came for what is in my vault. The fragment of the sword that sings. The key. Excalibur. She knew. She hadn't just collected it. She had studied it. She knew what it was. The game had just become infinitely more complex. You are as perceptive as your reputation suggests, my lady, Naruto said, his composure unruffled. I am a scholar. It is my business to perceive the truth beneath the surface, Serafina replied, leaning back in her chair. She steepled her fingers, her gray eyes never leaving Naruto. So, the question is, why do you want it? The church wishes to reforge it as a weapon against the underworld. The fallen angels and devils would seek its power for their own ends. But you are none of those things. You feel different, older. You are a ghost at this feast, aren't you? The fragments are a path, Naruto stated simply. A path I must walk. I see, Serafina said, though T was clear she saw far more than he was admitting. For a long moment, she was silent, studying him with an intensity that was both unnerving and strangely intimate. She was not seeing a warrior or a heretic, she was seeing a puzzle. A living paradox, a story grander than any written in her books. And she was utterly captivated. Finally, she broke the silence. I will not give it to you. Xenovia's patience snapped. That relic is the property of the church. It is not a trinket for a noble to hoard in her collection. Serafina arched a perfectly sculpted silver eyebrow at the outburst. My dear child, your church lost any claim to it the moment they allowed it to be stolen and desecrated. I acquired it, legally, from a merchant who had no idea what he possessed. It is mine. And in this city, the word of House Valerius carries more weight than the dictates of a foreign-born exorcist. Her gaze returned to Naruto, dismissing Xenovia completely. As I said, I will not give it to you. But, I may be persuaded to part with it. In exchange for a service. This was her gambit. She held the key, and she was setting the price. What service? Naruto asked, his expression unreadable. My family has rivals, she said. Her voice dropping slightly, becoming more conspiratorial. House Arcanum, a family of upstart mages who dabble in forbidden arts. They have an artifact in their possession, the obsidian heart of Ahriman, which they believe will grant them immense power. It is, in fact, a cursed object that is slowly corrupting their entire bloodline and poses a significant threat to the stability of this city. The church cannot act against them without proof, and the crown is too afraid of their magical power. She leaned forward, her stormy eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. I want you to infiltrate the Arcanum estate during their upcoming Solstice Gala, bypass their magical wards, and retrieve the obsidian heart. Bring it to me, and I will give you the Excalibur fragment. She was asking them to perform an impossible heist, to declare war on another powerful noble house, to plunge themselves into the heart of the city's treacherous political web. Naruto looked at the intelligent, beautiful, and utterly ruthless woman sitting before him. He had come here for a simple retrieval. Instead, he had found himself caught in a gilded cage, offered a key that could only be turned by walking deeper into the labyrinth. Xenovia was seething at the noble's arrogance, and Irina looked terrified by the prospect. But Naruto's gaze was steady. He had faced down gods and monsters. The political machinations of mortals, no matter how clever, were just another kind of battlefield. And on any battlefield, he was a master. A slow, confident smile touched his lips, a rare expression that transformed his handsome, weary face into something charismatic and almost predatory. Lady Valerius, he said, his voice a low, smooth murmur. You have yourself a deal. The scholar's gambit had been accepted. The game was now afoot. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Anatomy of a Theft. The air in Lady Serafina's library, which seconds before had been thick with the tension of negotiation, was now charged with the electric hum of a new, dangerous alliance. The scholar had laid her board, the heretic had accepted the game, and the two former exorcists were now pawns in a conflict far more subtle and treacherous than any holy war. Serafina's faint, amused smile bloomed into one of genuine satisfaction. She rose from her desk, her emerald gown flowing around her like liquid twilight, and moved towards a section of the library dedicated to cartography. Her movements were economical and precise, the very picture of intellectual grace. An excellent decision, she said, her voice retaining its smooth, melodic quality. Impulsive violence is so pedestrian. A battle of wits is a far more rewarding endeavor. I find your pragmatism refreshing. Master, you have yet to give me a name. Naruto, he supplied simply. Naruto, she repeated, tasting the unfamiliar syllables. Then, Naruto, let us arm you for this new kind of war. She pulled a large, rolled up piece of vellum from a tube. It was not a map, but a detailed architectural drawing. She spread it across her desk, revealing the intricate layout of the Arcanum estate. This is the domain of your adversary, Lord Cassian Arcanum, she began, her slender finger tracing the lines of the estate. He is a man of considerable magical talent but possesses all the subtlety of a charging bull. His pride is his greatest weakness. He believes his wards are impenetrable and his guards infallible. She tapped a section of the drawing depicting the main manor house. The Solstice Gala is their most significant social event of the year. The entire city's elite will be in attendance. This provides you with the perfect cover. You will not be an intruder, you will be a guest. And the wards? Xenovia interjected, her voice sharp and practical. She had stepped forward, her initial hostility now channeled into a focused, tactical scrutiny of the plans. She would not be a pawn. She would be a knight on this board. Ah, yes. The wards, Serafina said. A gleam in her stormy eyes. She looked at Naruto. Lord Cassian favors wards of perception and misdirection. Anyone entering the grounds with hostile intent or carrying a weapon of significant magical signature will trigger an alarm. Your companion's rather conspicuous holy sword would light up his warding scheme like a bonfire. Xenovia scowled, resting a proprietary hand on Durandal's hilt. The idea of being separated from her blade was anathema to her. The wards are anchored to a central focusing crystal in the manor's sub-basement, Serafina continued, ignoring the interruption. However, during the gala, the main guest entrance and the grand ballroom will have their defensive intensity nuanced. Lowered just enough to avoid offending his magically gifted guests. He would not want to embarrass a duke by setting off an alarm because of a magically enchanted signet ring. A window of opportunity, Naruto murmured, his eyes absorbing the entire schematic, committing it to memory. But the vault itself will be at maximum security. Precisely, Serafina confirmed, clearly impressed by his quick grasp of the situation. The obsidian heart is kept in the family's ancestral vault, located directly behind the main library. The entrance is a single, seamless stone door, sealed by a blood magic lock keyed to house Arcanum's lineage. Blood magic, Irina whispered, her face pale. That's forbidden by every holy text. The Arcanums have always considered themselves above such petty restrictions, Serafina said with a dismissive wave of her hand. The lock requires the fresh blood of a direct descendant of the Arcanum line to open. A single drop, applied to a hidden rune. So we need to get close to Lord Cassian or one of his family members. Acquire a drop of their blood without them noticing, find the hidden door in the library, and then bypass whatever physical and magical traps lie within the vault itself, all while attending a party, Xenovia summarized. Her tone thick with sarcasm. Is that all? That is the essence of it. Yes, Serafina said, unfazed. As for the obsidian heart itself, be cautious. It feeds on negative emotions, fear, anger, despair. To touch it directly while feeling any of those things is to risk being consumed by its influence. It must be handled with a clear mind and contained within a vessel that can nullify its aura. She walked to a display case and retrieved a small, unassuming gray silk pouch, its drawstring tied with a silver thread. This is woven from the silk of moon spiders and threaded with purified silver. It should contain the artifact's malevolent influence long enough for you to escape. She handed the pouch to Naruto, her fingers brushing against his. Her skin was cool, and for a fleeting moment, he felt a strange intellectual curiosity from her, as if she were trying to read his very essence through that brief contact. You have provided the what and the where, Naruto said, tucking the pouch into his coat. But not the how. We will require formal attire, and more importantly, forged invitations that can withstand magical scrutiny. Serafina's lips curved into a wry smile. My dear Naruto, I am a scholar and a lady of a great house, not a common forger. My assistance is in providing the intelligence for your operation. The cruder elements of its execution are for you and your associates to procure. This is Ethelgerd. Anything can be bought, if you know where to shop. She was testing him again, setting another hurdle to see how he would overcome it. He had entered her world. And now he had to play by its complex, unwritten rules. I understand, Naruto said, giving a slight nod of acknowledgement. He rolled up the architectural drawing with practiced hands. We will acquire what we need. We will be in touch when the deed is done. As they turned to leave, Serafina's voice stopped them one last time. Naruto. A word of advice. Lord Cassian has a daughter, Liana. She finds her father's obsession with power tedious and often seeks distractions. She may prove to be a useful variable in your equation. The suggestion was laden with subtext, a subtle nudge towards manipulation that Naruto acknowledged with a simple, unreadable glance over his shoulder before leading his companions out of the opulent library and back into the real city. The mood and their cramped room at the boarding house was a mixture of grim determination and nervous energy. The detailed map of the Arcanum estate was laid out on the table, a battlefield in miniature. This is insane, Irina said, pacing back and forth. We're not thieves. We were servants of the Lord. How are we supposed to do any of this? We are soldiers, Irina, Xenovia countered, her voice hard. She was tracing the route from the ballroom to the library on the map. The objective has changed, but the principles are the same. Infiltration, neutralization of defenses, and extraction of a target. We adapt, or we fail. Her gaze flickered to Naruto. But Lady Valerius is correct. We lack the necessary equipment. Naruto was leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, his expression thoughtful as he watched them. He had let them process, letting their own strengths and weaknesses come to the fore. Xenovia, the pragmatic soldier, was already breaking the problem down into tactical objectives. Irina, the moral compass, was struggling with the ethics of their new mission. Irina is right, Naruto said, surprising them both. We are not thieves. Thieves steal for profit. We are retrieving a dangerous object at the behest of a political power in exchange for a key to our own path. This is an intelligence operation. A covert mission. And every mission requires the right tools. He pushed himself off the wall. Xenovia is also right. We must adapt. Our holy powers are a liability here. We must rely on skill, strategy, and misdirection. He looked directly at Irina, his gaze softening slightly. And you, Irina, will have one of the most important roles of all. Irina stopped pacing, her eyes wide. Me? But what can I do? I can't fight mages, and I don't know anything about stealing. I don't need a fighter. I need an observer, Naruto explained. The obsidian heart radiates a profane, corrupting energy. Serafina could feel it from her estate. That's how she knows it's a threat. Your faith, your purity of spirit, you are more sensitive to that kind of energy than anyone. While Xenovia and I are inside, creating a distraction and approaching the vault, you will be our eyes. From a high vantage point outside the estate, I need you to focus, to feel for the artifact's location. Pinpoint it for us. It will prevent us from wasting time searching the library. He was not just giving her a task. He was validating her unique abilities, reframing them not as tools of an exorcist, but as a specialized skill for their current mission. A spark of confidence ignited in Irina's eyes. She had a purpose. As for the tools we lack, Naruto continued, his gaze shifting to Xenovia, Serafina was right about that, too. In a city this large, there are always people who operate in the shadows. People who can procure the impossible. We're going to meet one of them. The place Naruto led them to was as far removed from the Valerius estate as could be imagined. It was in the Rookery, a tangled, chaotic district of narrow, winding alleys and leaning tenements, where the sky was a mere sliver between overlapping rooftops. The air here was thick with the scent of coal smoke, cheap gin, and 100 other unidentifiable, unpleasant odors. This was the city's underbelly, its beating, grimy heart. He stopped before a dilapidated building that housed a pawn shop on the ground floor. The window was filled with a sad collection of junk: a tarnished silver locket, a three-legged music box, a rusty dagger. But the sign above the door, a crudely painted raven holding a key, was what Naruto was looking for. He led them not into the shop, but down a side alley and to a reinforced back door. He knocked a specific, complex rhythm. After a long moment, a peephole slid open, and a pair of suspicious eyes peered out. "We're not open for business," a gruff voice said. "We were sent by an old mapmaker," Naruto said calmly. "We're in the market for a set of keys. Custom made." There was another pause. The peephole slid shut. The sound of several heavy bolts being drawn back echoed in the alley, and the door creaked open. The room inside was a surprisingly organized workshop. Though it was cluttered with strange and esoteric items, half-finished clockwork devices, lenses of various sizes, jars of phosphorescent powders, and piles of books on metallurgy and arcane theory. And sitting at a large workbench, polishing a complex-looking gear with a small cloth, was a woman who seemed perfectly at home in the chaos. She was perhaps a few years older than Naruto, with a lean, wiry build. Her hair was the color of midnight, cut short and practical, with a few stray silver threads at her temples that spoke of stress rather than age. Her face was sharp and intelligent, with high cheekbones and a cynical twist to her lips. But her most striking feature was her eyes. They were a pale, piercing shade of gray, almost silver, and they moved with a restless, calculating energy, taking in every detail of her visitors. She wore practical leather trousers and a tunic, her hands and forearms smudged with grease and soot. This was Kaylin, the city's premier fixer. She gave Xenovia and Irina a quick, dismissive glance, her eyes lingering for a moment on the hilt of Durandal, before her full attention settled on Naruto. She tilted her head, her silver eyes narrowing as she assessed him. An old mapmaker. She said, her voice a low, smoky rasp. Old man Hemlock doesn't send people my way unless they have a very interesting problem or a very heavy purse. Judging by your clothes, I'm guessing it's the former. It's both, Naruto replied, his composure a stark contrast to the woman's restless energy. He placed the pouch of coins Serafina had given him on the workbench. It landed with a satisfyingly heavy thud. Kaylin glanced at the purse but didn't reach for it. Her focus remained on him. Money is boring. The problem is what makes a job interesting. So, what's the problem? You don't look like the usual noble looking to silence a mistress or a merchant wanting to ruin a rival. We require entry to the Arcanum Solstice Gala, Naruto stated. 3 invitations. High-quality forgeries capable of passing magical inspection. Formal attire suitable for the occasion. And information. A weakness in the estate's security that is not on the official schematics. Kaylin let out a low whistle, leaning back on her stool. A slow, dangerous smile spread across her face. The Arcanum Gala. You're not aiming low, are you, stranger? That's not a theft. That's suicide. Their wards are the best in the city. Which is why we came to the best, Naruto said, his tone one of simple, factual acknowledgement. His lack of flattery, his directness, seemed to please her. She finally picked up the coin purse, weighing it in her hand. This will cover the clothes and the invitations. The information, however, that has a steeper price. My price. I want to know why. I have no love for Lord Cassian. The pompous old goat. If you're planning on embarrassing him, I want to enjoy the details. We're retrieving an item on behalf of a third party, Xenovia cut in, her voice sharp. The details are not your concern. Kaylin's silver eyes snapped to Xenovia, a look of cold amusement in them. The blue-haired church dog has a bark. Cute. But the man in charge is the one who's talking. Her gaze shifted back to Naruto. She's right, of course. It's not my concern. But my professional curiosity is part of the price. Give me a taste, or find another forger. Naruto considered her for a moment. He sensed no malice in her, only a deep-seated cynicism and a professional's pride. She was a rogue element, but a skilled one. And her intuition was sharp. We're recovering a cursed artifact, Naruto said. Offering a partial truth. One that threatens the stability of this city. Let's just say our patron prefers a quiet solution to a public panic. That was enough. It framed the job as something more than a simple smash and grab. It was a challenge. Kaylin's smile widened. A cursed artifact from the Arcanum Vault. Now that is interesting. She tossed the coin purse in the air and caught it. All right, stranger. You've got a deal. Come back tomorrow at dusk. I'll have your party clothes and tickets. She then leaned forward, her voice dropping. As for information. Cassian's wards are powered by a central crystal, that much is common knowledge. But the energy conduits that feed it run throughout the estate, just beneath the floorboards. They have a harmonic frequency. If you can generate a counter frequency, you can create a small, localized, dead spot, in the warding field. It wouldn't last long, maybe 30 seconds at most, but it would be long enough to pass through a warded door or open a protected container without triggering the alarm. She tapped a complex diagram of a clockwork mechanism on her bench. Creating a device to do that is tricky. But disrupting it, that can be simpler. The conduits are susceptible to a very specific type of sonic resonance. A high-frequency pitch, perfectly tuned. Like a note from a crystal glass. If the glass were made of a celestial's tear. She looked at Ascalon's cloth-wrapped form on Naruto's back. You and your friends are radiating a strange energy. You're not mages. You're something else. If you have anything that can produce a pure, resonant tone of power, you might just have your key. Her insight was startling. She couldn't see his power, but she could sense its nature, its potential application in her own field of expertise. Naruto nodded slowly, a new level of respect for the cynical fixer dawning in his eyes. Thank you. Your information may prove invaluable. The next evening, as dusk settled over Ethelgard. They returned to Kalen's workshop. True to her word, she had everything ready. The invitations were masterpieces of forgery, the magical watermarks shimmering with an authentic light. And the clothes, they were fit for royalty. For Irina, a gown of deep sapphire blue that complemented her earnest brown eyes. For Xenovia, a form-fitting, elegant dress of BL. Oud red silk that was both beautiful and practical, allowing for a full range of movement. And for Naruto, a finely tailored black doublet and trousers, embroidered with subtle silver thread, that fit his powerful frame perfectly. Back in their room, as they dressed for the gala, the atmosphere was thick with a palpable tension. Irina fidgeted nervously, unused to the fine fabric and restrictive cut of the dress. Xenovia moved with a stiff, unnatural grace, clearly uncomfortable with being on display, her hands feeling empty without the familiar weight of Durandal, which she'd been forced to leave behind, wrapped in a blanket. Naruto, however, looked transformed. The simple, elegant attire stripped away the weary traveler and revealed something else, something of the leader he had once been. The clothes fit him with a natural grace, accentuating his height and broad shoulders. When he turned from the small mirror, his expression was calm, his blue eyes clear and focused. Both Xenovia and Irina found themselves staring, momentarily speechless. They had seen him as a wanderer, a warrior, and a mystery. Now, they saw him as a nobleman, a commander, a man who could walk into any court in the world and belong. Remember the plan, he said, his voice bringing them back to the reality of the mission. Irina, you'll find a perch on the roof of the clock tower opposite the estate. Use He watchmaker's spyglass Kalen provided. Focus your senses. When we're in the library, give us the signal. He handed her a small, smooth stone. When you find the artifact, pour a small amount of your holy energy into this stone. I'll feel it in the one I'm carrying. Xenovia, you are my personal guard. Stick with me. Your job is to watch for the household guard and be ready to create a diversion if necessary. I will handle Lord Cassian's daughter. He looked at them both, his gaze steady and reassuring. The plan is solid. The tools are in place. All that remains is the execution. Look confident. Act like you belong. And no matter what happens, follow my lead. He opened the door, and the sounds of the city at night, of music and distant laughter, drifted in. The solstice gala was beginning. Their curtain was about to rise. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A dance of masks and whispers. The Arcanum estate was not merely a mansion, it was a declaration of power written in white marble and shimmering magic. As their carriage, procured by Kalen and bearing a convincing, if entirely fictitious, minor noble crest, rolled to a stop before the grand entrance, Xenovia and Naruto were met with a wave of sensory information. The air, unlike the rest of the city, was perfumed with night-blooming jasmine and the subtle, clean scent of ozone from the ambient magical wards. Music spilled from the open doors, a soaring, complex symphony of strings and woodwinds that spoke of cultured patronage. Light from a dozen massive chandeliers blazed within, making the grand ballroom appear like a captured constellation. Dressed in her blood-red gown, Xenovia felt utterly exposed. The silk was a poor substitute for the familiar weight of her coat and the comforting pressure of Durandal's harness. This battlefield had no cover. No clear lines of engagement. The weapons here were whispered words, veiled glances, and the subtle currency of reputation. It was a form of combat for which she had no training, and she felt a deep, unnerving sense of vulnerability. Naruto, however, stepped out of the carriage and onto the manicured gravel path with an air of serene ownership. The fine black doublet did not wear him, he inhabited it. His posture radiating a quiet confidence that drew immediate, appreciative glances from the other arriving guests. He offered Xenovia his arm, his touch firm and reassuring. Breathe, he murmured, his voice too low for anyone else to hear as he smiled politely at a passing duke. You are my sworn shield, a warrior from a foreign land. Your discomfort is part of your mystique. Use it. Look fierce. Look unimpressed. You are above this. His words were a masterstroke. He didn't tell her to relax. He gave her a role to play, one that aligned with her core identity as a warrior. The tension in her shoulders eased slightly. She could be a guard. She could be unimpressed. That, she understood. She lifted her chin, her violet eyes taking on a cold, appraising quality as she scanned the crowd. Her discomfort now masked by an intimidating aloofness. Inside, the ballroom was a swirling kaleidoscope of color, sound, and power. Men in silks and velvets discussed politics and commerce in low, conspiratorial tones. Women, adorned with jewels that glittered like captive stars, traded gossip with smiles as sharp as daggers. The air was thick with ambition, envy, and 1,000 hidden agendas. Naruto navigated the room with the effortless grace of a shark gliding through a coral reef. He did not force his way into conversations, he seemed to drift into them, his presence a point of quiet gravity that naturally drew others in. He claimed to be a traveling scholar from a minor, unmapped eastern principality, a story vague enough to be unprovable and exotic enough to be intriguing. He spoke little, but listened with an unnerving intensity, his blue eyes seeming to understand the unspoken words beneath the pleasantries. He was a mystery, and in a city that ran on secrets. Being a mystery was the ultimate form of currency. Xenovia remained a half step behind him, a silent, beautiful, and dangerous shadow. Her stony expression and the way her gaze constantly swept the room, missing nothing, only enhanced Naruto's allure. Whispers followed them. Who is he, to command the loyalty of such a fearsome woman? Meanwhile, miles away and hundreds of feet in the air, Irina lay prone on the cold stone of the clock tower's belfry. The city of Ethelgard was a breathtaking tapestry of lights below her. Through the powerful spyglass Kalen had provided, she had a clear, albeit distant, view of the Arcanum Estate's grounds. She held the small, smooth stone Naruto had given her, its surface cool against her skin. Her task was simple, yet it required a level of focus she had never before attempted. She closed her eyes, shutting out the distracting beauty of the city, and reached out with the senses her faith had honed, searching not for the holy, but for its profane antithesis. Back in the ballroom, Naruto finally spotted his targets. Lord Cassian Arcanum was exactly as Serafina had described him. A bull of a man, with a barrel chest, a booming voice, and a face flushed with wine and self-importance. He was holding court near the grand fireplace, his every pronouncement met with fawning agreement by a circle of lesser nobles. And near the French doors that led out to the moonlit gardens, standing alone and observing the festivities with an air of detached melancholy, was his daughter. Liana Arcanum was her father's opposite in every way. Where he was bombast, she was quiet grace. She was tall and slender, with a cascade of raven black hair that seemed to drink the light and eyes the color of twilight. She held a flute of champagne, but had not touched it. Her gaze fixed on the dancers as if she were a naturalist studying the bizarre mating rituals of an alien species. There was an artist's soul in her eyes, a yearning for authenticity in a world of artifice. Naruto excused himself from a conversation with a portly merchant and moved not towards the father, but towards the daughter. He didn't approach her directly, but stopped nearby, seeming to admire a large, abstract painting on the wall. A chaotic swirl of blacks and deep blues, slashed through with a single, violent streak of crimson. The artist was clearly in a great deal of turmoil. Naruto commented to the painting, his voice pitched just right for her to overhear. Anger, and a deep, desperate desire to break free from something. Liana turned, startled from her reverie. She looked at him, then at the painting, her twilight eyes widening in surprise. You can see that? She asked, her voice softer than he expected, holding a note of genuine curiosity. Saint people just comment on how it fails to match the draperies. Most people are not looking, Naruto replied, finally turning his full attention to her. His blue eyes met hers, and in that moment, he wasn't playing a role. He saw the gilded cage she lived in, and he acknowledged it. It takes a great deal of passion to paint with such honesty. And a great deal of courage to display it in a place like this. A faint blush touched her cheeks. It is mine, she admitted quietly. My father considers my hobby a frivolous distraction, but he allows it as long as it does not interfere with my duties. A world without art would be a world without a soul, Naruto said. It is not a distraction, it is a necessity. For the first time that evening, a genuine smile touched Liana's lips. It was a small, hesitant thing. But it transformed her face, chasing away the shadows of melancholy. You are not from Ethelgard, are you? No one here speaks so plainly. No, he said, returning her smile. Where I am from, honesty is a weapon. And art is a form of survival. Their conversation flowed easily after that. He did not flatter her or try to impress her. He simply listened. He asked her about her inspirations, about the colors and emotions she tried to capture, and he understood. He saw her, the artist, the dreamer, not just the noble daughter to be bartered in a marriage alliance. And Liana, starved for a genuine connection in her shallow world, found herself captivated by this handsome, enigmatic stranger who saw the truth of her soul in a canvas of chaotic paint. From across the room, Xenovia watched them, a strange, unidentifiable emotion twisting in her gut. She saw the way Liana looked at Naruto, the way her posture had changed from defensive to open. He was a master of this battlefield, too. He disarmed his targets not with steel, but with empathy. The thought was both impressive and deeply unsettling. The time had come to approach the father. With a polite bow to Lien, and a promise to find her for a dance later, Naruto moved towards the fireplace. He timed his approach perfectly, accidentally, stumbling as a servant passed, bumping into one of the sycophantic no. Bless and causing a splash of red wine to stain the cuff of Lord Cassian's immaculate white sleeve. 1,000 apologies, my lord. Naruto exclaimed, his voice laced with the perfect amount of dismay. Cassian, interrupted mid-boast, turned with a thunderous expression. Clumsy fool. Do you know how much this tunic cost? He bellowed. Allow me, Naruto said, ignoring the outburst. He quickly produced a clean, white silk handkerchief from his doublet. Before Cassian could protest, Naruto gently but firmly took the man's wrist and dabbed at the stain. His movements were swift and precise. He blotted the wine, his thumb pressing firmly against the lord's pulse point. It was an act that took less than 5 seconds. There, Naruto said, pulling back. The stain is lessened, though I fear the silk is marred. I am in your debt, my lord. He bowed deeply, the stained handkerchief now crumpled in his fist. Cassian, mollified by the stranger's deference and the quick apology, merely grunted. See that you watch where you are going. He dismissed him, and immediately returned to his story, the incident already forgotten. Naruto retreated back into the crowd, his expression unreadable. In his hand, the handkerchief held what he needed, a few drops of red wine, and absorbed into the fine silk fibers, a sample of Lord Cassian Arcanum's blood. Phase 1 was complete. He found Xenovia and gave her a nearly imperceptible nod. He then made good on his promise and sought out Liana for a dance. As the orchestra swelled, he led her onto the floor. He was a surprisingly adept dancer, his movements strong and confident. For a few minutes, the mission was forgotten. There was only the music, the swirl of the dancers, and the palpable, intriguing connection between the wandering ghost from a dead world and the captive artist. It was then that he felt it. A faint, rhythmic pulse against his skin from the small stone in his pocket. Pulse, pulse, pulse. Irina's signal. She had found it. The library. He brought the dance to a graceful conclusion, bowing to Liana. You are a wonderful dancer, my lady, he said, his voice a low murmur. But I fear the wine and the heat of the room have left me in need of a moment's air. Of course, Liana said, her twilight eyes filled with a hint of disappointment. Will you return? Without a doubt, he promised, and the words felt truer than he intended. He met Xenovia by the arched hallway that led towards the residential wing of the manor. East wing. Second floor, he said quietly. Let's move. They slipped away from the ballroom, the vibrant music fading behind them, replaced by the imposing silence of the great house. They moved like ghosts through the richly decorated corridors, their soft-soled dress shoes making no sound on the thick carpets. The library was a monument to arrogance. It was a 2-story rotunda, its walls lined with books that looked as if they had never been read. A large, ornate desk sat in the center, and a spiral staircase led up to a second-floor gallery. The air was still and smelled of old leather and dust. Irina's signal placed it here, Naruto whispered, his eyes scanning the room. Behind a false wall. Look for any inconsistencies in the stonework or shelving. They began a systematic search. Xenovia, with her warrior's eye for detail, checked the alignment of the bookshelves, while Naruto ran his hands over the grand, unlit stone fireplace, feeling for seams or triggers. Minutes stretched into an eternity. Every distant laugh from the ballroom sounded like an approaching guard. Here, Xenovia hissed from the far side of the room. She had found it. Behind a row of identical, leather-bound tomes on genealogy was a section of the wall where the mortar between the stones was almost invisibly thin. There was no handle, no keyhole, only a single, small rune, no bigger than a thumbnail, carved into the central stone. Naruto approached, pulling out the blood-stained handkerchief. He squeezed a single, dark drop onto his fingertip and pressed it to the rune. The symbol flared with a brief, crimson light. A low grinding sound echoed in the silent room as the stone door, a perfect, seamless section of the wall, began to slide inwards. But behind it was not the vault. It was a shimmering, translucent wall of purple energy, a secondary magical barrier that crackled with contained power. An alarm ward. To touch it would bring the entire household guard down on them. Serafina didn't mention this. Xenovia grit out, her hand instinctively reaching for a sword that wasn't there. Kalen did. Naruto breathed. It's a resonance ward. He looked at the barrier, his mind racing. He had hoped to avoid using Ascalon's power, even a sliver of it, but he had no choice. He needed a pure, resonant tone. He closed his eyes, reaching inward, not to the sword itself, but to the divine, conceptual energy that now resided within him, the power of the holy sword god. He focused, shaping a minuscule fragment of that power. Not into a blade of light, but into a single, perfect note of sound. He hummed, a low, single-pitched tone that seemed to make the very air vibrate. The purple ward flickered. The pitch was close, but not perfect. It was resisting. What are you doing here? The voice, soft but firm, came from the library's entrance. They spun around. Standing in the doorway, her twilight eyes wide with a mixture of shock, betrayal, and dawning understanding, was Liana. She had followed them. Lady Liana, Naruto said, his voice calm, betraying none of the tension of the moment. This is not what it appears to be. Isn't it? She countered, stepping into the room. You are not a scholar. You are a thief. And I was a fool. The hurt in her voice was palpable. We are not here to steal for profit, Xenovia said, stepping forward protectively. There is an object in your family's vault, a cursed artifact, that is a danger to everyone in this city. The obsidian heart, Liana whispered, her gaze falling on the open vault door and the shimmering ward. My father's obsession. I've felt its coldness spreading through this house for years. It makes him harder, crueler. She looked at Naruto. Her expression conflicted. Is that truly why you are here? To take it away? Yes, Naruto said, his gaze honest and direct. That is our only objective. Liana stood in silence for a long, agonizing moment. Her mind at war. She had been deceived, used as a distraction by a man who had captivated her. Yet, he was here to remove the very thing she had come to hate, the sork. Of the shadow that was falling over her family. Her loyalty to her father warred with her desire for the light. Finally, she made a choice. She walked past them, her elegant gown whispering against the stone floor, and stood before the purple ward. The ward is keyed not just to my family's blood, but to our will, she said quietly. It is designed to stop those who would take from us. But it will yield to one who wishes to give. She reached out and pressed her palm flat against the shimmering energy. I, Liana of House Arcanum, give you leave to pass, she declared, her voice ringing with a strange, sudden authority. Take the heart from this house, and do not return. The purple ward dissolved into a shower of harmless, fading sparks. Before them lay the open vault, a small, dark chamber. And in its center, resting on a black velvet pedestal, was the obsidian heart. It was a fist-sized, perfectly cut piece of black crystal that seemed to absorb the light around it. A palpable aura of cold, malevolent intelligence radiated from it, whispering of despair and promising power. Naruto stepped into the vault, his mind a fortress of calm. He ignored the profane whispers that clawed at the edges of his consciousness. He swiftly opened the gray silk pouch from Serafina and, without touching the artifact directly, scooped it from its pedestal and into the bag, pulling the silver drawstring tight. Instantly, the oppressive, chilling aura vanished. He turned back to Liana. You have taken a great risk, he said, his voice low. My father's path leads only to darkness. Perhaps T.S. is the first step towards a different one, she replied, though her gaze was troubled. There is a servant's passage behind the tapestry in the West Hall. It will lead you to the gardens. Go, before you are discovered. Liana. He started, feeling an uncharacteristic need to explain, to thank her properly. Go, she insisted, her voice firm, though her twilight eyes were filled with a storm of unshed tears. Just go. Naruto gave her one last, long look, a look that conveyed more than words ever could. Then he and Xenovia slipped out of the library, leaving Liana alone in the sudden, profound silence, the open, empty vault, a testament to her choice. They found the passage, and moments later, they were in the cool night air of the gardens, the sounds of the gala a world away. They scale the outer wall with practiced ease and disappeared into the labyrinthine streets of Ethelgard, the cursed heart secured, their impossible mission a success. But Naruto knew this was not a clean victory. He had not just stolen an artifact, he had stolen a young woman's trust and, in doing so, had irrevocably altered the course of her life. The dance was over, but the consequences of its intricate steps were only just beginning to unfold. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Scholar's Reward and the Fixer's Price. The return to the boarding house was a silent, hurried affair, a retreat from the guild. Battlefield into the anonymity of their Spartan room. The adrenaline of the heist faded, leaving behind a complex and unsettling residue. Irina, having met them at a pre-arranged point, was the first to break the silence. Her sapphire blue gown looking strangely out of place in the drab surroundings. Liana, will she be all right? She asked, her voice small, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. She helped us. Her father will be furious when he discovers the heart is gone. Lord Cassian's fury will be directed at the thieves who breached his impenetrable security, not his own daughter, Xenovia answered. Her tone clipped and analytical as she unfastened the clasps of her blood-red dress with sharp, angry movements. To admit she was involved would be to admit his own bloodline as disloyal. He will keep it quiet to save face. She will be punished, but it will be a private, family matter. She tossed the elegant gown onto a chair as if it were a soiled rag. She made a calculated decision to trade the heart for a chance to weaken her father's corrupting influence. It was a strategic sacrifice. It wasn't a strategy, it was a cry for help, Naruto said quietly, his back to the as he looked out the small window at the indifferent city below. He had already shed the fine doublet, returning to his simple, practical clothes. She was a prisoner choosing a new jailer. We used her despair to our advantage. Do not mistake it for anything noble on our part. His words landed with the weight of cold stone. Xenovia fell silent, her pragmatic assessment suddenly feeling hollow. A defense mechanism against the moral ambiguity of their actions. She had been trained to fight monstrous, inhuman evil. This felt different. It was messy, human, and left her feeling tainted in a way no battle with a devil ever had. She looked at Naruto's broad back, at the stillness in his posture. He had orchestrated the entire affair with flawless precision, had manipulated a young woman's oceans with the skill of a master courtier, and yet he was the one who acknowledged the true, ugly cost. This contradiction, this fusion of ruthless competence and profound empathy, was the core of the enigma that was Naruto Uzumaki. And it was a puzzle she found herself increasingly, and frustratingly, compelled to solve. We did what was necessary to get the fragment, she said at last, the word sounding more like a question than a statement. We did, Naruto agreed, finally turning to face them. In his hand was the gray silk pouch, inert and harmless looking. And now, we collect our reward. The second meeting at the Valerius estate was fundamentally different from the first. There was no pretense, no game of scholar and supplicant. Marius, the severe steward, led them through the grand halls with a new, grudging respect in his eyes. When they entered the sun-drenched library, Lady Serafina was not seated behind her desk. She stood by the tall, arched windows overlooking her gardens, a cup of steaming tea in her hand. The very picture of patient, confident grace. You were successful, she stated, her stormy gray eyes lighting up with genuine intellectual excitement as they settled on the pouch in Naruto's hand. The whispers have already started to slither through the city's high society. A security breach at the Arcanum Gala. Lord Cassian in a near-apoplectic rage. And his daughter, Liana, suddenly taken ill and confined to her chambers. Your work is not subtle, Naruto, but it is undeniably effective. Naruto placed the pouch on the polished mahogany of her desk. We fulfilled our end of the bargain. Serafina set her tea aside and approached the desk, her movements fluid and deliberate. She did not touch the pouch immediately. Instead, she circled it, studying it like a biologist examining a new and dangerous species. May I? Naruto nodded. With a pair of silver tongs, she carefully loosened the drawstring and peered inside. She did not recoil. Instead, she leaned closer. Her expression one of pure, unadulterated fascination. Remarkable, she breathed. The way it seems to twist the light, to draw in the warmth. The chaotic energy structure is unlike anything described in the Gaudia or the Clavicula. It is not demonic in origin, it is something far older. Pre-Adamic, perhaps. A relic of a forgotten, nihilistic creation. She looked up at Naruto, her eyes shining. To have seen this, to have held it, you have no idea how exhilarating this is. Most people would have been repulsed by the artifact's malevolent aura. Serafina Valerius was intellectually aroused by it. Xenovia felt a chill run down her spine. The lady of the house was, in her own refined way, as dangerous as any sorcerer obsessed with power. Her obsession was simply with the knowledge that underpinned it. Satisfied, Serafina retightened the pouch and pushed it to the side. She then walked to a hidden panel behind a bookshelf depicting the constellations, pressing a sequence of runes. A section of the wall slid aside with a whisper of well-oiled machinery, revealing a vault door forged from gleaming, silver-like metal covered in intricate, interlocking warding symbols. She placed her palm upon it, and with a soft chime, it swung open. The vault was not a storeroom cluttered with artifacts. It was a pristine, white marble chamber, climate-controlled and magically lit. In its center, on a simple, elegant pedestal, lay the second Excalibur fragment. It was a piece of the hilt and cross guard, larger than the first fragment from Brekalon. It pulsed with a steady, powerful silver light, its holy song filling the chamber. Serafina made no move to stop him as Naruto stepped into the vault. As he reached for the fragment, the first piece, which he carried in an inner pocket, began to vibrate and glow. Its light visible through the fabric of his coat. When his fingers closed around the hilt fragment, a wave of pure, holy energy washed through the room. It was warm and cleansing. A stark contrast to the chilling aura of the obsidian heart. A deep, resonant hum filled the air as the two pieces of the legendary sword acknowledged each other. Naruto stepped out of the vault, holding the fragment. His face was unreadable, but Xenovia could see a new intensity in his eyes. He was one step closer to his goal. Our deal is concluded, he said to Serafina. Is it? She countered, a sly, knowing smile playing on her lips. The vault door whispered shut behind him. You have 2 fragments now. There are 5 more. They are scattered across the continent, hidden in forgotten ruins. Hoarded by ancient creatures, and used as sources of power by factions you know nothing about. You can continue to stumble from one to the next, a ghost in the dark, or, you could walk a path illuminated by knowledge. Quote. She gestured to the library around them, to the thousands of books and scrolls, the maps and artifacts. This is merely my personal collection. My family's network of agents, informants, and scholars spans the globe. We have access to records and archives that make the Vatican's famed library look like a provincial reading room. I know where another of the fragments is. And I have well-founded theories on the locations of 2 others. Xenovia's eyes widened. This was the shortcut Naruto had spoken of, a path to their goal that could save them years of fruitless searching. But she could also see the hook within the bait. I propose a new arrangement, Serafina continued, her gray eyes locked on Naruto. An alliance. You will continue your quest, B.U.T. with the full backing of House Valerius. I will provide you with funding, equipment, and, most importantly, intelligence. All I ask in return is that you share what you find. Allow me to study the fragments. Tell me the stories of your world, the truth behind the chronicles of the Sun Eater. Your existence is the greatest discovery of the millennium, Naruto. I want to be the one to document it. The offer was immensely tempting. It was a path of efficiency and power. But it was also a chain, binding them to this brilliant, manipulative noblewoman and her unknown, far-reaching agenda. We will consider your offer, Naruto said. His tone noncommittal. He gave a slight bow. Thank you for honoring our agreement, Lady Valerius. He turned and led them out, leaving Serafina standing in her library, a confident, patient smile on her face. She had planted her seed. she was certain it would grow. They were halfway through the rookery, taking a circuitous route back to their boarding house, when a figure detached itself from a shadowed doorway, blocking their path. It was Kaylin, the fixer, her arms crossed, a cynical smirk on her face. Well, she said, her smoky voice cutting through the evening gloom. The party crashers return from their visit to the spider's parlor. You're all still in one piece, so I assume you succeeded. Her pale, silver eyes scanned them, noting their changed demeanor. The new tension in the air. I also assume you caused enough of a ruckus to get my name flagged by every guard captain and noble steward in the city for providing your invitations. That kind of heat costs extra. We paid you for the tools you provided, Xenovia stated coldly. You paid me for the tools, yes, Kaylin acknowledged, her gaze shifting to Naruto. But I my price for the information was a story. And from what I hear, it's a good one. So, pay up. What really happened in that marble mausoleum? She wasn't threatening them. It was a matter of professional principle. Naruto respected that. He stopped, considering the shrewd, pragmatic woman before him. She was an outsider, like him. A survivor who operated by her own code. We removed a cancerous growth from the heart of the city, he said, deciding on a version of the truth she would understand and appreciate. Lord Arcanum was playing with powers he didn't understand, a cursed object that was slowly poisoning him and his house. Our patron wanted it removed before it became a public menace. We were the surgical instruments. Kaylin's smirk widened into a grin of genuine appreciation. Surgical instruments. I like that. She pushed herself off the wall, falling into step beside them as they continued walking. So you're not just common thieves. You're troubleshooters. Fixers for the high and mighty. Her silver eyes glinted with interest. That's a much more interesting line of work. It's also a line of work that requires a very particular set of skills. Skills I happen to have in abundance. She had her own proposition. Listen, stranger. You're good. You're quiet. You're competent. And you've got a crew that, despite looking like a lost holy crusade, seems to get the job done. I don't know what your long-term game is, but I can tell it's bigger than a single job. You're going to need things. Things you can't get from a noble lady in a tower. You're going to need smuggling routes, alibis, specialized gear. An ear to the ground in the places the nobles pretend don't exist. That's my world. She looked directly at Naruto, her expression all business. I'm not interested in your coin. I'm interested in the work. You've got something big planned, I can feel it. When your next job needs a specialist, a master forger, a clockwork engineer, an escape artist, you come to me. My price will be a piece of the action. Not the gold, the action. The challenge. Deal. It was another alliance, offered not in a pristine library but in a grimy, torch-lit alley. Where Serafina offered knowledge from above, Kaylin offered skill from below. Both women, powerful and brilliant in their own right, had seen something in Naruto, some combination of power and purpose, and they wanted to be a part of it. I'll keep that in mind, Naruto said, the words a tacit agreement. Kaylin grinned, satisfied. You do that. She gave Xenovia a final, mocking wink and then melted back into the shadows as silently as she had appeared. Back in the safety of their room, the full weight of the day's events settled upon them. 2 fragments of a legendary sword lay on the small wooden table, pulsing with a soft, synchronized light. 2 offers from 2 powerful, dangerous women lay in the air between them. We cannot trust either of them, Xenovia stated, pacing the room like a caged tigress. Quote, the Lady Valerius sees you as a fascinating specimen to be dissected. The other one, the criminal, sees you as a ticket to a more exciting life of crime. They will both betray us the moment it serves their interests. Maybe. Naruto conceded, his gaze fixed on the fragments. Or maybe their interests will align with ours for a time. An alliance does not require trust. It requires a mutual understanding of benefits and consequences. He reached out, not touching the fragments, but hovering his hand over them. He closed his eyes and channeled a tiny, infinitesimally small stream of the pure, divine energy of Ascalon into them. The effect was immediate. The light from the fragments flared, and an image bloomed in the minds of all 3 of them. It was not a clear picture, but a cascade of sensori impressions. The biting sting of wind-driven snow, the thin, cold air of a high mountain peak, the rhythmic chanting of deep voices, the scent of pine and burning incense, and the image of a monolithic stone monastery. Its rooftops covered in snow, clinging to the side of a jagged, cloud-wreathed mountain. And deep within, a third fragment, this one a large piece of the blade itself, resting on a sacred altar. Guarded by stern-faced men in simple robes, their hands resting on the hilts of curved swords. The vision was over in a heartbeat, leaving them breathless. The spine of the world mountains, Irina whispered in awe. The monastery of the silent palm. It's a legend. A lost sect of warrior monks who are said to guard a gateway to the heavens. It seems they guard something else as well, Naruto said, opening his eyes. He now had a destination. A fortress, not of magic and intrigue, but of martial skill and spiritual devotion. He looked at the two fragments, then at the faces of his companions. Xenovia, fierce, loyal, her certainties shattered but being reforged into something stronger. Irina, compassionate, resilient, her faith evolving beyond the confines of scripture. They were his team. They had walked into the fire with him and emerged changed. He then thought of the two women who now orbited his quest. Serafina, the scholar in her tower of knowledge. Kalen, the fixer in her web of shadows. Both offered power, speed, and resources. Both came with the price of entanglement. To be truly free was to be alone. But to succeed, to navigate this complex world and find his way, he might need allies. He might need the very chains they offered. We will accept Lady Valerius's offer of information, he said, his voice ringing with finality. And we will make use of Kalen's skills when we need them. Xenovia opened her mouth to protest, but Naruto raised a hand. We will accept their help, he continued, his blue eyes meeting hers, clear and absolute. But we will not be their pawns. They think they are adding me to their game. They will soon learn that they have just become pieces in mine. The decision was made. The path was set. Their small, strange fellowship was about to acquire new, powerful, and very complicated assets. The hunt was truly on. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Price of Knowledge and the Wrath of the Sea. The opulent guest quarters provided by Lady Serafina were a far cry from their cramped room at the boarding house, but the gilded cage felt more constrictive than liberating. For 2 days, they remained within the secure walls of the Valerius estate, a brief, tactical pause to allow the city's furor over the Arcanum heist to peak and begin its inevitable decline into rumor and speculation. It was a time of intense preparation, of digesting the new, complex alliances that now defined their quest. Naruto met with Serafina alone in her library, a silent agreement that Xenovia and Irina's presence would be an unnecessary calm. Plication in what was fundamentally a transaction of intellect. The air between them was different now, stripped of pretense. It was the charged atmosphere of a chessboard, with two masters acknowledging each other's skill. The monastery of the silent palm, Serafina began, unrolling a magnificent, hand-drawn map of the northern territories across her desk. The vellum was thin and ancient, the ink faded but the lines precise. A curious choice for a piece of Excalibur. The monks who reside there are a schismatic sect, founded centuries ago by a warrior priest who believed that divinity was not found in prayer, but in the perfection of the self. They are utterly divorced from the politics of the church and the world. They seek enlightenment through martial discipline and meditation. They are, in a word, formidable. Her long, slender finger traced a path from their current location, Ethelgard, northwards. They revere strength and purpose above all else. To approach them as supplicants would be met with dismissal. To approach them with force would be unwise. Their Grand Master, a man named Kalen, a common name in the north, it seems, though of a very different character than your underworld acquaintance, is said to be able to shatter stone with a single, focused exhalation. They are guardians, not hoarders, Naruto surmised, his eyes absorbing the map, the topographical details. The names of forgotten outposts and treacherous passes. They believe the fragment is a sacred object to be protected, not a weapon to be used. Precisely, Serafina affirmed, a flicker of admiration in her stormy eyes. You grasp the core of a problem with remarkable speed. They will not yield the fragment to a request. You must prove yourself worthy of it. You must demonstrate a purpose had aligns with their own philosophy of self-perfection and the protection of balance. She pushed a heavy, leather-bound book towards him. This is the Codex of Schisms. It contains the only known, detailed account of the Silent Palm's founding principles. Study it. Your victory will not be won with your sword, Naruto, but with your understanding. Next, she slid a small, lacquered wooden box across the table. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was not gold, but a single, intricately engraved silver ring bearing the crest of House Valerius. This is a letter of credit, she explained. There is no currency in it. But any agent, merchant, or informant loyal to my house will recognize it. It will grant you access to our resources, lodging, supplies, passage. It is a leash, of course, she added with a disarmingly honest smile. It allows me to track your progress. But it is a leash that will open many doors for you. Naruto picked up the ring. He did not put it on. Instead, he simply enclosed it in his fist. Your knowledge is a valuable tool, Lady Valerius. But I am not your agent. Our alliance is one of mutual benefit. The moment that ceases to be the case, this ring and our agreement become meaningless. The challenge was soft-spoken but absolute. Serafina's smile did not falter. If anything, it widened. I would be disappointed if you thought otherwise, she said, her voice a low purr. A tamed ghost would be a terribly boring specimen, after all. His meeting with Kalen, the fixer, was a world away in both atmosphere and substance. He met her in a new location, the sea. Eller of a raucous brewery in the rookery, the air thick with the smell of hops and fermenting grain. The heat from her new, portable forge made the room swelter. She was hammering a piece of glowing metal on a small anvil. Her movements economical and powerful. So, the Spider Queen gave you your marching orders, she grunted without looking up, her words punctuated by the ringing of the hammer. Heading north, I hear. The spine of the world. Not exactly a holiday destination. We need passage. A ship from a northern port. One that doesn't ask questions, Naruto said, getting straight to the point. Already done, Kalen said, plunging the metal into a bucket of water with a violent hiss. She turned, wiping her brow with the back of a grimy hand, her pale silver eyes glinting in the forge light. There's a port town called Whitecliff, a 3-week ride from here. Whalers and fur trappers mostly. Grim folk. I have a contact there, a ship's captain named Grigor. He owes me. His vessel is the Sea Serpent. It's a sturdy, ugly tub, but it can handle the northern straits. He'll take you across the frozen bay to the Fjordlands. From there, it's a week's trek into the mountains. She tossed a bundle onto a nearby crate. Your party clothes were lovely, but not practical for a blizzard. Cold weather cloaks, lined with owlbear fur. Grappling hooks and silk rope. Crampons for ice. Trail. Rations that taste like sawdust but will keep you alive. My finest work. What's your price? Naruto asked. Kalen laughed, a harsh, grating sound. My price. My price is a front row seat. That ring Serafina gave you. It sings a little song on a network only her people, and people like me who know how to listen to her people's toys, can hear. I'll be tracking you. Not to interfere, but to learn. You're the most interesting thing to happen to this continent in a century, stranger. My payment is the education. She leaned closer, her cynical smirk fading into something more serious. One piece of advice the noble lady won't give you. The Silent Palm monks. They don't just test your strength and your spirit. They test your connections. They believe attachments to the world are a weakness. They will try to isolate you. To turn you against your own people. Be ready for it. Armed with knowledge from the scholar and tools from the fixer, Naruto returned to his own team. He briefed Xenovia and Irina on the nature of their next challenge, laying out the map and the codex Serafina had provided. This is a test of a different kind, he explained. They will not be swayed by power or force. They will judge our character. Our unity. Our purpose. Xenovia, I need you to be more than a guard. I need you to be a student. Read this codex. Understand their philosophy. You, who have lost your faith, are uniquely positioned to understand those who have forged a new one from discipline alone. He then turned to Irina. Irina, your role is equally crucial. Your faith is not a weakness here, it is a lens. The monks seek divinity through self-perfection. Your faith seeks it through devotion to an external power. They will see you as a curiosity. Your sincerity, your unwavering belief in something outside yourself, will be a puzzle to them. Do not preach. Just be yourself. Be a mirror that shows them a different path to the same sky. He had given them a new mission, one that required not just their swords, but their minds and their souls. He was not just leading them, he was forging them into something more than they had been. Xenovia accepted the book with a solemn nod, her expression one of intense focus. Irina clutched the holy symbol around her neck, her eyes filled with a new, quiet determination. The journey north to Whitecliff was an arduous 3 weeks. The rolling green hills gave way to rugged, windswept moorlands and dense, ancient pine forests. The nights grew colder, the stars clearer in the unpolluted air. They spoke little, each lost in their own thoughts and preparations. Xenovia was engrossed in the codex, often debating passages with Naruto by the campfire, her questions sharp and insightful. She was not just reading the words, she was wrestling with them, testing them against the ruins of her old dogma. Irina spent the time in quiet prayer and observation. She tended to the horses, her gentle nature seeming to calm the beasts. She learned to identify edible plants and to read the signs of the weather in the clouds. Her faith was becoming less about recitation and more about a quiet, profound connection to the living world around them. The journey was stripping them down to their essentials, and in doing so, was making them stronger. Whitecliff was less a town and more a wound on the edge of a bleak, gray sea. It was a place of stark functionality, built from timber and stone against the constant assault of the wind. The air smelled of cold brine, fish guts, and the smoke from whale oil lamps. The people were as grim and weathered as the landscape, their faces etched with the hardships of their lives. Kalen's contact, Grigor, was the captain of the Sea Serpent. He was a mountain of a man with a wild, gray-streaked beard and eyes the color of sea ice. He met them on the docks, his gaze sweeping over them, lingering on Naruto. He didn't ask their names or their business. He simply looked at the ring on Naruto's finger, grunted, and said, "Kalen's lot. You pay your fare in trouble, I expect. Be on the quay at high tide. The sea waits for no one." As they stood on the docks, looking out at the vast, churning expanse of the frozen bay, Xenovia shivered. Though not from the cold. "I have fought fallen angels and stood in the courts of nobles," she murmured, her voice almost lost in the cry of the gulls. "But this feels more intimidating. The sheer, empty power of it." "It's not empty," Naruto said, standing beside her, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "It is full of life, and death, and purpose. It just doesn't care about yours. It's a good reminder that our struggles, our entire world, are just a small part of something much, much bigger." The voyage began under a sky the color of lead. The Sea Serpent was indeed an ugly, sturdy tub, its timbers groaning in protest as it plowed through the heavy, rolling waves. For the first few days, a monotonous routine of cold, wind, and endless gray water set in. Irina was terribly seasick, and to her own surprise, Xenovia found herself tending to the younger girl, bringing her weak broth and ensuring she was warm, her maternal instincts overriding her usual stoicism. On the 5th day, the sky turned a bruised, sickly purple, and the sea grew agitated. Captain Grigor's face, already a roadmap of hardships, became a mask of grim concentration. "A bad one's coming," he growled to Naruto, who stood on the deck, his feet planted wide, his body moving with the violent sway of the ship. "A real devil's squall. The kind that chews ships up and spits out splinters. Lash down everything that's loose." The storm hit them like a physical blow. The wind howled like a tortured beast, ripping at the sails and rigging. Rain, hard and cold as pellets of ice, flew horizontally, stinging any exposed skin. And the waves, they were mountains of churning, black water, lifting the small ship to terrifying heights before dropping it into deep, stomach-lurching troughs. The crew, a hardened lot of northern sailors, worked with a desperate, practiced efficiency. But this was no ordinary storm. It felt malicious, its fury too focused, too relentless. Naruto became an anchor in the chaos. He moved about the deck with a supernatural sense of balance, his chakra-enhanced strength allowing him to secure lines that 3 men struggled with. He used his senses not to fight the storm, but to flow with it. Calling out warnings of rogue waves moments before they struck, his voice cutting through the roar of the wind. He was not a passenger. He was part of the ship, part of the crew. His calm resolve a bulwark against the rising tide of fear. Xenovia, Her seasickness forgotten, found her own purpose. She could not match Naruto's raw power, but her disciplined mind and warrior's training made her an invaluable asset. She relayed Grigor's orders, organized the securing of cargo in the hold, and her very presence, calm and fearless in the face of the tempest, shamed the younger sailors into holding their nerve. The climax came in the dead of night. A sound like a thunderclap, sharp and sickening, echoed through the storm. The main mast, under the impossible strain, had cracked. Splintered and groaning, it threatened to collapse, to bring the entire rig down and cripple the ship, leaving them helpless. It's going to go. Grigor roared, his face a mask of despair. We're lost. No, we're not. Naruto yelled back. He grabbed a thick coil of anchor rope. Xenovia, I need a counterweight. Something heavy and absolute. Xenovia understood instantly. She drew Durandal. The greatsword, a weapon of holy destruction, seemed to absorb the fleeting light of the storm lanterns, its polished steel a point of cold, hard reality in the swirling chaos. While Naruto and the crew used the ropes to brace one side of the mast, Xenovia moved to the other. She drove the point of Durandal deep into the deck's thickest timber, the holy blade sinking into the wood as if it were soft earth. She wrapped another line around the greatsword's cross guard, creating an unmovable anchor point. It was an act of profound improvisation, using a sacred relic as a common tool. For what felt like a lifetime, they fought a battle of leverage and will against the storm. Naruto, his muscles straining, became the focal point, directing the sailors, his body a conduit for their combined effort. Xenovia, her feet planted, her hands gripping the rope, became the unbreachable defense, Durandal holding fast against the fury of the sea. And then, as suddenly as it began, the worst of the storm passed. The wind's shriek lessened to a mournful howl, the mountainous waves subsided into a heavy, violent chop. The mast, splintered and damaged but still standing, held. As the bruised dawn broke, revealing a ravaged deck and a weary, battered crew, Naruto stood beside Captain Grigor, looking at the eastern horizon where a sliver of sun was visible. The ship was alive. They had survived. Grigor took a long pull from a hip flask and offered it to Naruto, the highest sign of respect a northern captain could give. I've been sailing these waters for 50 years, the old captain said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion and awe. I've never seen a storm like that. And I've never seen a man like you. You're no scholar. Naruto took a small sip of the fiery liquid, its warmth spreading through his chest. I'm a traveler, he said simply, handing the flask back. Later, Xenovia stood by the ship's railing, cleaning the salt from Durandal's blade. The storm had passed, leaving behind a profound, aching stillness. She watched Naruto as he helped the crew clear the wreckage, working alongside them, his movements efficient, his presence commanding not through words, but through action. She had seen him defeat a holy warrior with contemptuous ease. She had seen him unmake a fallen angel with divine light. She had seen him outwit a ruthless noble in her own court. But here, in the heart of the storm, she had seen something else. She had seen him risk his life, not with a grand display of power, but with sweat, rope, and sheer, indomitable will, all to save a ship full of strangers. Her admiration for his power had been absolute. But what she felt now, watching him in the quiet light of the new day, was something deeper, something far more complicated and dangerously close to devotion. It was not the blind faith she had once given to her god, but a clear-eyed respect for the man himself. 2 days later, they saw it. A dark line on the horizon, rising from the sea. The Fjordlands. And beyond them, piercing the clouds like shards of broken glass, were the snow-capped peaks of the spine of the world mountains. Their voyage was over. Their true test was about to begin. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Monastery of the Silent Palm and the Echoes of the Soul. The Fjordlands were a realm of raw, unfinished creation. The sea serpent, a battered survivor, navigated a labyrinth of deep, dark water channels flanked by colossal cliffs that rose vertically from the sea, their granite faces scarred by ancient glaciers. Waterfalls, born from melting snow high above, plummeted thousands of feet in curtains of white mist, their thunderous roar the only sound that could challenge the eternal sigh of the wind. It was a landscape of brutal majesty, one that made the ambitions and conflicts of men seem like the scurrying of ants in the shadow of a cathedral. Their trek began at the head of a long, desolate fjord. The moment their boots touched the rocky shore, the world changed. The rolling, heaving motion of the sea was replaced by the unyielding solidity of the mountains. The air grew thin and sharp, tasting of cold stone, pine, and an immense, intimidating purity. Is was the base of the spine of the world, and their destination, the monastery of the silent palm, was a week's hard climb into its frozen heart. The first few days were a battle against the terrain. They followed winding goat paths that clung precariously to the sides of steep valleys, with 1,000-foot drops a constant, unnerving companion. They forded rivers of meltwater so cold it felt like fire. The current a physical blow against their legs. Kalen's gear proved its worth a dozen times over. The fur-lined cloaks were a sanctuary against the biting wind that howled down from the peaks. And the crampons and grappling hooks turned sheer ice walls and treacherous rock faces from impassable barriers into solvable, albeit exhausting, problems. In this vertical world, their fellowship was forged anew. Stripped down to its functional core. Naruto was the undisputed leader, his senses, honed in a world of shinobi, making him preternaturally aware of the mountain's dangers. He moved with a quiet, tireless confidence. Scouting the path ahead, testing for loose rock or hidden crevasses. He was the anchor, the unshakable point of stability they all relied on. Xenovia, freed from the complex intrigues of the city, became a paragon of physical resilience. She carried her share of the supplies and the immense weight of Durandal without a word of complaint, her disciplined muscles and unwavering will perfectly suited to the brutal demands of the climb. She had absorbed the contents of the Codex of Schisms, and during their brief rests, she would discuss its philosophies with Naruto, not as a believer, but as a strategist analyzing a potential enemy's doctrine. She was mapping their minds as surely as Naruto was mapping the mountain. Irina, who they had feared would be the weakest link, revealed a different kind of strength. Her slight frame housed a surprising endurance, but her true contribution was one of spirit. While Naruto and Xenovia focused on the physical challenge, Irina focused on the life that clung to this harsh environment. She was the one who spotted the hardy mountain herbs that could be brewed into a restorative tea, the one who noticed the majestic flight of a snow eagle against the high blue sky, the one whose quiet, heartfelt prayers each evening for their safety seemed to create a small, warm pocket of peace in the vast, cold emptiness. She was the soul of their expedition. A reminder of the life and grace that existed even in this unforgiving place. On the evening of the 6th day, they reached a high ridge. The sun was setting, and the world below them was a sea of clouds, obscuring the lands they had left behind. Above them, the sky was a dome of impossible clarity, transitioning from fiery orange to the deepest indigo, pricked with the first, diamond-hard stars. And there, against the face of the highest peak, they saw it for the first time. The monastery of the silent palm. It was an architectural impossibility, a thing of sublime, terrifying beauty. It was not built upon the mountain, but into it, its structures of gray stone and dark timber seeming to grow organically from the cliff face itself. A series of interconnected pagodas. Their roofs elegantly curved and laden with snow, were linked by a web of vertiginous rope bridges that swayed gently in the wind. Not a single light shone from its windows. It was utterly silent, a fortress of discipline clinging to the roof of the world. It looked less like a home for men and more like a roost for dragons. The sight filled them with a mixture of awe and profound apprehension. They were approaching a place that had deliberately severed itself from the rest of humanity, a place where the rules of the world below had no meaning. The final approach took another full day. A grueling climb up a seemingly endless staircase carved into the rock, each step slick with ice. The air was painfully thin now, and every breath was a conscious effort. When they finally stood before the monastery's main gate, a massive door of reinforced wood, bound with black iron, bearing no handle or lock, they were met not by a challenge, but by silence. As if sensing their presence through the very stone, the gate swung inwards with a low, groaning sound. The monk who stood there was a statue carved from mountain rock. He was a giant of a man, his head shaved, his face a mask of serene indifference. He was clad in simple, layered gray robes that did nothing to hide the thick cords of muscle in his neck and forearms. He did not speak. He simply looked at them, his dark eyes seeming to weigh their very souls. And then gestured for them to enter. The interior of the monastery was a world of disciplined emptiness. The corridors were hewn from the living rock of the mountain, their walls smooth and unadorned. The air was frigid, yet still, and scented with pine incense. The only sound was the whisper of the wind through the high eaves and the soft, rhythmic shuffling of their own feet. Monks, all clad in the same gray robes, moved through the halls with a silent, focused grace. Their presence felt more as a shift in the air than as a physical sight. They were ghosts of purpose, each one a self-contained universe of discipline. They were led to the great hall, a cavernous chamber whose far wall was open to the sky, offering a breathtaking, terrifying view of the cloud sea below. In the center of the hall, seated on a simple rush mat, was a man who seemed to be the absolute antithesis of his surroundings. He was ancient, his body frail and withered, his skin as thin and translucent as old parchment. His eyes were closed, and he seemed as insubstantial as a puff of smoke. Yet, the palpable aura of power that radiated from him, a stillness so profound it felt like the quiet at the heart of a star, dwarfed that of every other monk combined. This was Grand Master Kalen. He did not open his eyes. You have traveled far. His voice was not the reedy rasp of an old man, but a calm, resonant whisper that filled the vast hall without any effort. From a gilded cage in the south, led by the whispers of a spider in her web. You have weathered the sea's wrath and conquered the mountain's spite. You are Naruto Uzumaki, the ghost from a dead world. You are Xenovia Quarta, the sword of a broken faith. And you are Irina Shido, the heart of a distant god. He knew everything. Not just their names, but the essence of their beings. Serafina's knowledge and Kalen's intel felt like children's toys compared to the profound, intuitive perception of this man. We have come for the sword fragment, Naruto said, his voice respectful but firm. The key you guard. That which you call a key, we call a dissonant chord, the Grand Master whispered, his eyes still closed. A shard of a song that ended a world. Its power is not for the unworthy. To possess it, you must first prove that your own song is one of harmony, not of discord. You must face the trials of the three echoes. You must face the truth of yourselves. He finally opened his eyes. They were a startlingly pale, clear blue, like ancient ice, and they held a wisdom so vast it felt infinite. You will face these trials alone. Your bonds, your reliance on one another, are an attachment to this transient world. Here, you must stand on the strength of your own soul. If you fail, you will be sent back down the mountain. If you succeed, we will speak again. Before they could protest, 3 more monks appeared at their sides as silently as smoke. They were separated, each led down a different, echoing corridor into the heart of the mountain, into the heart of their own trial. Irina was brought to a circular chamber, lit by a single butter lamp that cast long, dancing shadows. The room was bare save for 2 meditation cushions. An elderly monk, his face a roadmap of peaceful wrinkles, sat on one, beckoning her to the other. There were no weapons, no threats. You believe in a God who resides in a distant heaven, the monk began. His voice gentle. You pray to him, you draw strength from him. It is a borrowed strength. A child clinging to her father's hand. What happens when that hand is gone? Who are you, without your God? This was her trial. The echo of belief. It was a spiritual and intellectual dissection. For hours, the monk, a master of logic and philosophy named Jin, systematically deconstructed her faith. He used reason to poke holes in scripture, to highlight the inconsistencies of dogma, to argue that her reliance on an external deity was a refusal to cultivate the divinite. Why that lay dormant within all living things. He was not cruel, but his arguments were as sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. Irina, the earnest girl who had followed orders her whole life, found herself in a battle she had never been trained for. She could not quote scripture, for he would unravel it. She could not speak of miracles, for he would call them superstition. She found herself stumbling, her arguments faltering. The foundations of her simple, heartfelt faith seeming to turn to sand beneath her. Doubt began to creep in. Was her faith just a crutch? Was she weak? Tears welled in her eyes, born of frustration and a terrifying, nascent fear that he was right. She thought of Naruto's power, born from within. She thought of Xenovia's strength, forged in discipline. What did she truly have? And then, she remembered the journey. She remembered tending to a seasick Xenovia, not because a book told her to, but because she felt her friend's pain. She remembered the taste of the mountain herbs. A gift from the living world. She remembered the look in Naruto's eyes, the profound loneliness, and the deep, instinctual desire she felt to offer him some small measure of comfort. She looked up at the monk. The tears now gone, her eyes clear and shining with a new, unshakable certainty. You are right, she said, her voice soft but steady. Perhaps my God is distant. Perhaps my scriptures are flawed. Written by imperfect men. You say my strength is borrowed, but you are mistaken. My faith is not a well from which I draw power for myself. It is a window through which I see the divinity in others. She leaned forward, her expression filled with a compassion so pure it was a tangible force in the room. My faith doesn't teach me that I am strong. It teaches me that Xenovia is worth protecting. It teaches me that Naruto's burden is too heavy for him to carry alone. It teaches me that even you, in your perfect discipline, might value a simple act of kindness. My God's greatest teaching is not about power, but about empathy. My strength is not borrowed from him, it is the strength I find when I give of myself for others, as he taught me to. And that, I believe, is a truth as profound as any you have found on this mountain. The old monk, Jin, stared at her, his placid expression broken by a flicker of genuine surprise, and then, profound respect. In her simple, heartfelt words, she had revealed a truth their inward-looking philosophy often overlooked. The divinity found not in the self, but in the selfless connection between souls. She had not won an argument. She had demonstrated a higher wisdom. He bowed his head slowly. Her trial was over. Xenovia's trial took place on a wide, circular stone platform jutting out from the cliff face. The wind howled around her, threatening to tear her from her footing. Before her stood a monk, a woman this time, with a lithe, powerful build and a face that was a mask of cold serenity. She held a simple, 6-foot wooden staff. You are the sword of a broken faith, the monk's voice was as sharp as the wind. You have traded one master for another. You follow the ghost, believing his power will give you purpose. Our conviction is a hollow echo of another's will. Show me the strength of this new master. This was the echo of identity. A trial by combat. Xenovia drew Durandal, its holy power a familiar comfort in this strange, hostile environment. She charged, her movements a blur of red silk and silver steel, her anger at the monk's words fueling her attack. But her opponent was a phantom. The woman moved with an impossible, flowing grace. Her staff a mere extension of her body. She did not block Xenovia's furious blows, she redirected them. A slight tap here, a subtle pivot there. Xenovia's overwhelming force was turned against her, sending her stumbling, her power useless. Every attack she made was met with a calm, effortless deflection. Your anger makes you predictable, the monk taunted, her voice a whip crack in the wind. You fight like a zealot, clinging to a weapon you no longer have the faith to wield. The church taught you to be a hammer. Your new master has taught you nothing. The RDS were salt in the wound of her deepest insecurities. Was she just a follower? Had she simply traded one cage for another? Rage, hot and blinding, consumed her. She poured all her power, all her frustration, into a single, devastating overhead slash, the signature move of a church executioner. The monk did not move. At the last possible second, she took a single step inside Xenovia's guard and struck. Not with the end of her staff, but with her open palm. The blow was not powerful, but it was perfectly placed, striking a nerve cluster in Xenovia's shoulder. A jolt of paralyzing energy shot through her arm, and her fingers went numb. Durandal, her partner, her burden, her identity, clattered from her grasp and slid across the stone platform, stopping just inches from the edge. Xenovia fell to her knees, defeated, disarmed, and utterly humiliated. The monk stood over her, her expression unchanged. You rely on the sword. You rely on your anger. You rely on your master. You have nothing of your own. Your trial is over. You have failed. As the monk turned to leave, something inside Xenovia broke. It was not her spirit, but her pride. The last, stubborn remnant of the arrogant church exorcist she had been. She looked at the monk's back, then at Durandal, lying so close to the abyss. And then she thought of Naruto and Irina, facing their own trials, relying on her. Her reason for fighting had been a complex mess of broken faith, newfound loyalty, and desperate purpose. But in that moment of absolute failure, it became crystal clear. It was not about God, or Naruto, or even a quest for truth. It was simpler. It was about the two people who had seen her at her worst and had not abandoned her. She rose to her feet, her arms still numb, her body aching. She did not retrieve Durandal. She stood, empty-handed, and faced the monk. Her violet eyes, cleared of the storm of anger, were now as calm and deep as a mountain lake. I am Xenovia Quarta, she said, her voice quiet but ringing with a new, profound authority that came from within. I am not a sword of the church. I am not the ghost's follower. I am the shield of my comrades. And you are in my way. She charged again. No weapon. No holy power. Only her body, her will, and a purpose that was finally, truly her own. The monk turned, surprised by this new conviction. Their battle resumed, but it was different. Xenovia was no longer a hammer. She was water. Flowing, adapting, her movements fluid and precise. She could not win with strength, so she won with cunning. She anticipated, she dodged, she used the monk's own momentum against her. Their fight was no longer a clash of power, but a dance of wills. And Xenovia's will, forged in failure and tempered by a pure, selfless purpose, was now absolute. She did not defeat the monk. The trial ended when she landed a single, clean blow, a palm strike to the chest that mirrored the one that had disarmed her. It was not a powerful blow, but it was a perfect one. A statement. The monk stumbled back, a look of profound respect dawning on her serene face. The echo has faded, she said, bowing deeply. You have found your own voice. Naruto's trial was last. He was led deep into the mountain. Into a vast, natural cavern. The only light came from fissures in the ceiling, casting ethereal beams through the gloom. The air hummed with a strange, musical quality. The wind, flowing through 1,000 different holes and tunnels in the rock, created a constant, shifting, and deeply ancient melody. This was the heart of the mountain. And waiting for him, seated on a stone throne, was Grandmaster Kalen. There will be no combat here, Naruto Uzumaki, the Grandmaster's whisper echoed in the cavern. Your physical power is immense, a tidal wave in a world of ponds. To test it would be meaningless. We must test the vessel that contains the wave. We must test your purpose. This was the echo of purpose. There was no physical opponent. The enemy was Naruto's own soul. You are a ghost, Kalen continued, his ice blue eyes piercing Naruto's defenses. You drift through this world, but you are not of it. You collect these fragments, hoping they are a key to a home that no longer exists. A home you failed to protect. The words struck a nerve deeper and more painful than any physical blow. The cavern around Naruto seemed to waver, replaced for a moment by images of fire, destruction, and the faces of friends he had lost. The sorrow that Alara the herbalist had seen in him, the sorrow he kept buried beneath a mountain of calm control, threatened to erupt. Your power is the echo of a world of war, Kalen pressed on, his voice relentless. It was forged in conflict, designed for destruction. You bring that echo into our world. You have already shattered a zealot's faith, broken a noble house, and created chaos in the heart of a great city. You believe you are a protector, but you are a catalyst for conflict. What is your true purpose, Ghost? Is it to find a way home? Or is it to remake this world in the violent image of your own? Naruto stood silent, the wind song a lament for his past. Everything the Grandmaster said was true. He was a relic. He was a weapon. His quest was a selfish one, a desperate search for a redemption that was likely impossible. The immense power of the Holy Sword God felt less like a gift and more like a curse, the final heavy legacy of a life defined by battle. What right do you have to wield a world-shaping power when your own world is dust? Kalen's final question hung in the air, absolute and damning. For a long time, Naruto did not answer. He let the Grandmaster's words wash over him, let the pain and the guilt he had suppressed for so long rise to the surface. He acknowledged the truth in them. He was a failure. He was a ghost. But as he looked into the abyss of his own sorrow, he saw two sparks of light. A fierce, violet flame of a warrior who had found a new identity by his side. A gentle, steady blue light of a girl whose compassion had reminded him of the meaning of kindness. He saw the stormy gray eyes of a scholar who challenged his mind, and the cynical silver eyes of a fixer who understood his world. He saw the twilight eyes of a captive artist he had, however unintentionally, set free. His old world was gone. His old purpose was ash. But a new world, a new purpose, had been quietly, unexpectedly building itself around him. My home is gone, Naruto said finally, his voice clear and steady, echoing in the vast cavern. It was not a confession of failure, but a statement of fact. I cannot return. My quest for the fragments is no longer about finding a way back. It is about ensuring the power that ended my world does not do the same to this one. He looked at the Grand Master, and for the first time, the sorrow in his eyes was not a veil, but a source of strength. You are right. My power was born from war. But the hand that wields the sword decides its purpose. My purpose is no longer to fight for a village or a nation. It is to protect the bonds I have formed here. To protect my comrades. To build a place where they can be safe. That is a purpose that is my own. That is a purpose worthy of this power. He had not found an easy answer. He had forged a new one from the wreckage of his past. He accepted who he was. The ghost, the failure, the weapon, and had given himself a new reason to be. Grandmaster Kalen's ancient face broke into a small, serene smile. The ghost has found a reason to live, he whispered. The echo has become a new song. When the three were reunited in the Great Hall, the change in them was palpable. They stood taller, their presence more centered. They had walked through their own personal fires and had emerged stronger, their understanding of themselves and each other now absolute. Grandmaster Kalen led them to the monastery's deepest sanctuary. There, resting on a simple stone altar, was the third fragment. It was a long, beautiful section of the blade, shimmering with a light purer and stronger than the other two combined. A great power can be a great curse, the Grandmaster said, his voice a gentle whisper. But a great purpose can transform a curse into a gift. Your purpose is now clear. You are worthy. He gestured to the altar. Naruto stepped forward and took the fragment. As his fingers touched the cold, powerful steel, the three pieces he now possessed flared with a brilliant, golden white light. A new vision flooded their minds, clearer than the last. A sprawling, decadent city in the heart of a sun-drenched desert. A grand tournament of fighters. And the next fragment, offered as the ultimate prize, wielded by a champion of immense, arrogant power. They stood on the precipice of the Great Hall, looking down at the world below. The third fragment safely stowed. The wind was cold, but it no longer felt hostile. The world was vast, but it no longer felt empty. Their quest was far from over, but for the first time, they were walking a path not of escape, but of purpose. They were not just collecting keys, they were becoming the guardians this new world needed them to be. Chapter 9 End. Chapt. R10. The unburdening of ghosts and the forging of a path. The descent from the monastery of the Silent Palm was the inverse of the ascent in every way imaginable. The climb had been a brutal, physical war against the mountain. A struggle for every foot of elevation. The journey down was a quiet, contemplative unwinding, a gradual return from the thin, pure air of the heavens to the thick, complicated atmosphere of the world. The physical exertion was less, replaced by a profound, internal sense of change, a psychic recalibration in the wake of their trials. The silence that accompanied them for the first day was not the tense, uncertain quiet of strangers, but the deep, comfortable silence of comrades who have witnessed the contents of each other's souls and have no need for superficial words. They moved with a new, unspoken synchronicity. When Naruto paused to check the stability of a snow-covered ledge, Xenovia was already there, anchoring his safety rope without a word. When Irina began to tire, Naruto would subtly shorten their pace, and Xenovia would pass her a waterskin, their actions flowing from a shared, intuitive understanding. They had entered the monastery as a commander and his two disparate followers. They were leaving it as a single, cohesive unit. The landscape itself seemed to reflect their transformation. The stark, monochromatic world of ice and rock slowly bled back into color. First came the dark, resilient green of the high-altitude pines, their branches heavy with snow. Then, the hardy brown of the tundra, and finally, as they descended into the protected valleys, the vibrant, living greens and earthy browns of the lower fjordlands. The air, which had been a blade of pure cold, softened, carrying the scent of damp earth, wet stone, and the distant, briny promise of the sea. The oppressive silence of the peaks was broken by the cheerful gurgle of meltwater streams and the tentative chirping of birds. The world was coming back to life, And so, it seemed, were they. It was on the third night of their descent, huddled around a crackling campfire in a sheltered stone overhang, that the silence was finally, purposefully broken. Irina, wrapped in her owlbear cloak, had fallen into an exhausted, peaceful sleep, her trial having granted her a new, serene confidence that radiated from her even in slumber. Naruto was methodically sharpening a small utility knife. His movements economical and precise, his gaze lost in the dancing flames. Xenovia sat across from him, the immense form of Durandal resting beside her. She had been meticulously cleaning the greatsword, a familiar, meditative ritual. But tonight, her movements were different. They were less the actions of a soldier maintaining her weapon and more those of a scholar studying a familiar, yet suddenly foreign, text. She was no longer defined by the blade, and this new freedom had changed her relationship with it. It was a tool, a powerful one, but it was no longer the anchor of her identity. That anchor was now forged from something else entirely. They tested your purpose, she said, her voice quiet but clear, cutting through the crackle of the fire. It was not a question, but an opening. Naruto didn't look up from his knife, but the rhythm of his hands paused for a fraction of a second. They did. Grandmaster Kalen. He saw the truth of you, she pressed gently, her violet eyes watching him with an intensity that had nothing to do with tactical assessment and everything to do with a deep, personal need to understand. He saw the ghost. The sorrow. Alara, the herbalist in Brekalon, saw it too. It is a weight you carry, a cloak you wear as surely as the one on your back. What did you say to him? How do you satisfy a man who can see the wounds on your soul? His was the first time she had ever directly addressed his past, his inner world. It was a profound shift in their dynamic, a crossing of a boundary that had been unspoken but absolute. She was no longer just his soldier, awaiting orders. She was his partner, asking to share the burden. Naruto set the knife and whetstone aside. He finally looked up, his blue eyes, reflecting the firelight, seeming to hold an entire history of loss. The weary melancholy was still there, but it was different now. It was not a shroud, but a scar, a part of him that had been acknowledged, accepted, and integrated. I told him the truth, he said. His voice a low, gravelly murmur. I told him that he was right. I am a ghost. My world is gone, and a large part of me died with it. For a long time, my only purpose was a selfish one. To find the fragments in the desperate, foolish hope that they might be a key back to a home that is only a memory. A home I failed to protect. He picked up a stick and prodded the fire, the embers glowing brighter, illuminating the stark lines of his face. The Grandmaster asked me what right I had to wield my power in this world, when my own was dust. He called me a catalyst for conflict, an echo of a life of war. Quote. Xenovia listened, her expression unreadable, her entire being focused on his words. She could feel the immense weight behind them, the lifetime of pain he had condensed into those few sentences. For a moment, Naruto confessed, his voice dropping even lower, I had no answer. Because he was right. Every action I have taken here has led to conflict. I broke you to remake you. I used a young woman's pain to commit a theft. I am a weapon, and weapons are made for only one thing. He looked away from the fire and directly at her. His gaze was so direct, so vulnerable, that it felt more intimate than any physical touch. But then I realized my purpose wasn't behind me anymore. It isn't in the past, in a world of ghosts. It's right here. His gaze flickered for a moment to the sleeping Irina, and then returned, with even greater intensity, to Xenovia. It's you. Both of you. It's the bonds of formed in this world. The Grandmaster called them attachments, weaknesses. But he was wrong. They are the only thing that is real. My purpose is no longer to find a way home. It is to build one. To protect the people who have chosen to walk this path with me. I accepted the ghost I am. And in doing so, I gave him a new reason to live. The confession hung in the cold night air, raw and profound. He had unburdened himself, not of the pain, but of the loneliness of carrying it. He had taken the abstract concept of their fellowship and declared it to be the new cornerstone of his existence. Xenovia felt the words resonate deep within her. His trial had mirrored her own. He, too, had been forced to let go of a past identity and forge a new purpose centered on his comrades. The arrogant church exorcist and the lonely ghost from a dead world had, through separate fires, Been reforged into the same shape, a shield for each other. My trial was one of identity, she said, her own voice softer now. The monk who tested me said I was a hollow echo of your will. That I had simply traded the church for a new master. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. She defeated me. She took Durandal from me. And in that moment, with nothing left, I found the only thing that was truly mine. It was not a sword, or a faith, or a master. It was my duty to protect Irina. And to protect you. A small, sad smile touched her lips. It seems we both found our purpose in the same place. In that moment, everything changed. The commander and the soldier were gone, replaced by two equals, two survivors who had found in each other a mirror for their own brokenness and a reason for their own strength. It was a bond deeper than loyalty, more profound than friendship. It was the absolute, unshakable recognition of two souls who had been forged into a matched pair. Naruto reached across the fire, his hand open. Xenovia hesitated for only a heartbeat before placing her hand in his. His grip was warm and firm, a silent, binding oath in the heart of the mountains. Their journey continued, but the atmosphere was lighter. The shared confession had been a catharsis, and a new, easy companionship settled over them. They talked more freely, sharing stories of their pasts. Naruto spoke of his life as a shinobi, of the camaraderie of his old team, of the joyous, chaotic mentor who had shaped him. He spoke of loss, not with the sharp edge of fresh grief, but with the quiet ache of accepted memory. Xenovia, in turn, spoke of her harsh, lonely childhood in the church's care, of the brutal training, and of her complex, almost sisterly rivalry with Irina. They were filling in the empty spaces of each other's histories, weaving their separate stories into a single, shared narrative. A few days later, they came across a small, isolated village clinging to the shores of the fjord. It was a poor place, the people thin and wary, their lives a constant struggle against the harsh environment. They were met with suspicion until a child, feverish and weak, collapsed in the muddy track before them. While Naruto and Xenovia stood back, assessing the situation with a warrior's caution, Irina moved forward without hesitation. She knelt by the child, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated compassion. She diagnosed the fever, brewed a tea from the mountain herbs she had gathered, and coaxed the child to drink, her voice a soft, reassuring murmur. He spent the rest of the day in the village, moving from hut to hut, tending to their sick, sharing their meager rations, and, most importantly, listening to their stories with an empathetic ear. She did not preach. She did not speak of her God. She simply acted out the core tenet of her renewed faith. She showed them that their suffering was seen, that their lives had value. By evening, the Cian of the villagers had transformed into a quiet, reverent gratitude. They offered the trio the best of their food and the warmest spot by the central fire. Watching from the edge of the village, Xenovia turned to Naruto. Her trial showed her that her faith was not a weapon, but a window, she murmured, a note of awe in her voice. I don't think I truly understood until now. Her strength. It's quieter than ours. But it may be the greatest of all. It is, Naruto agreed, a look of profound respect on his face as he watched Irina laugh with a group of village children. Power can break a mountain. But compassion can move the hearts of those who live on it. She reminds us what we are ultimately fighting for. When they finally reached the grim port town of Whitecliff, it felt like a return to a foreign country. The grit, the noise, the casual desperation of the place was a stark contrast to the profound silence and clarity of the mountains. Two messages were waiting for them at the office of the harbormaster. The first was a small, crudely wrapped package. Inside was a set of masterfully crafted throwing knives, perfectly balanced and forged from a dark, non-reflective metal, along with a set of new, high-quality leather straps and buckles for Durandal's harness. The note, written in a sharp, angular script, was brief and to the point. Heard from a little bird that the mountain coughed you back up. Figured you might have misplaced some gear. Consider it a professional courtesy. Don't get yourself killed before the jobs get interesting. Kalen's message was a cynical, practical, and strangely comforting reminder of their connection to the world's underbelly. The second message was delivered by a man in the discreet, gray livery of House Valerius. It was a sealed tube of polished rosewood. Inside was a thick, detailed dossier printed on fine vellum. It contained maps of the southern desert continent of Shurima, detailed analyses of the political landscape of the merchant city-state of Zahar, and a meticulously researched profile of the reigning champion of the Sunstone tournament, a brutal pit fighter named Darius Vex, who was known to wield a massive, glowing blade as his signature weapon. The accompanying letter from Serafina was written in a flawless, elegant script. Naruto, your success at the monastery of the Silent Palm has reached my ears and has confirmed my hypothesis that your capabilities extend beyond the physical and into the philosophical, a truly fascinating combination. I have taken the liberty of compiling all available intelligence on your next objective. The Sunstone tournament in Zahar is a crude and brutish affair, but it is the stage upon which the next fragment is being displayed. I trust you will find a more elegant solution than simply entering the competition as a common gladiator. I await the results of your efforts with great anticipation. Your work continues to be the most compelling research of my career. SV. The two messages, laid side by side, represented the two poles of their new network of alliances: the pragmatic, street-level skill of the fixer and the vast, strategic knowledge of the scholar. Both women, in their own way, were watching, waiting, and investing in his quest. That night, their last in the cold north, Naruto and Xenovia stood on the same docks where they had first met Captain Grigor. The sea was calm, a sheet of liquid obsidian reflecting the brilliant, cold stars. The sea serpent, its new mast a pale scar against the night, was being loaded with cargo for a southern voyage. Zahar, Xenovia said, breaking the silence. From the highest ice to the hottest sand. This path does not offer much rest. No, Naruto agreed. It doesn't. She turned to him, the sea breeze catching a strand of her cobalt blue hair. The moonlight softened the sharp, warrior's edges of her face, revealing a vulnerability and a beauty he had not allowed himself to fully see until now. When I served the church, she said, her voice a low, intense murmur, my path was laid out for me in stone. When I first chose to follow you, it felt like I was stepping off a cliff into an unknown fog. Now, she paused, searching for the right words. Now, the path is still unknown. But it no longer feels uncertain. It feels like my path is you. Not as a follower to a master, or a soldier to a commander. She looked down at her own hand. Then placed it on the rough, salt-crusted wood of the railing. When I was lost, I used you as a guide. But now, it is as if I am a compass needle, and you are my true north. It is not a matter of following. It is a matter of alignment. My purpose is where you are. Her confession was the most honest and profound declaration she was capable of making. It was not a flight of romantic fancy, but a statement of absolute, fundamental truth, spoken in the martial, purposeful language of her own soul. Naruto listened, his expression unmoving, but his eyes held a new warmth that seemed to push back the cold of the northern night. He reached out and placed his hand over hers on the railing, his larger, calloused hand completely covering her own. A compass is only useful if it's held by a steady hand, he said, his voice a quiet promise. And a shield is nothing without someone to stand behind it and a purpose to protect. It was not a declaration of love. Not in the simple words of a poet or a courtier. It was something more. It was an acceptance. A pact. It was the quiet, unshakable foundation of a fortress they would build together, a home for two ghosts who had finally, in each other, found a reason to stop wandering. Irina joined them a moment later, her presence a gentle, welcome addition to their quiet communion. The three of them stood together. A silent trinity on the edge of the world, looking south towards a new horizon, a new battle, a new beginning. They were no longer just a team. They were a fellowship, their bonds forged in fire, tempered in ice, and now, finally, ready for the heat of the desert sun. Chapter 10 End.